My name is Aloysius Winthrop, and I've been hauling freight across the western states for the better part of 23 years. In all that time, through all those lonely nights on empty highways and countless deliveries to places most folks wouldn't want to visit in broad daylight, nothing has ever shaken me quite like what happened at the Grimsby Meat Processing Facility outside Los Angeles on that humid September night in 2019. I should start by saying that I'm not a man who scares easily. Growing up in rural Montana, I'd seen my share of slaughterhouses and processing plants. The sight of blood never bothered me, and the smell of raw meat was just part of the job when you're hauling refrigerated trailers across California. But there was something different about this particular delivery, something that started feeling wrong from the moment I received the dispatch order. The call came in around 4 in the afternoon. I was parked at a truck stop just outside Bakersfield, catching a few hours of sleep before what I thought would be a routine run to San Diego. My dispatcher, a gravelly-voiced woman named Martha who'd been roading trucks since before I started driving, sounded different when she called. There was a hesitation in her voice that I'd never heard before. "Aloysius," she said, using my full name, which she only did when something was serious. "I've got a special run for you. Double rate, but it's got to be tonight." Double rate meant something was either extremely urgent or extremely unpleasant. In my experience, it was usually both. "What's the cargo?" I asked, already reaching for my logbook. "Specialized refrigeration equipment. The client specifically requested you." That made me pause. I'd never delivered to this client before. At least, not that I could remember. "Who's the client?" "Grimsby Meat Processing. It's a small facility about 40 miles northeast of LA, up in the industrial district near San Fernando. The plant manager, Cordelia Grimsby, asked for you by name." The name, Cordelia Grimsby, didn't ring any bells, but it wasn't unusual for word to get around about reliable drivers. Still, something about Martha's tone made my skin prickle. "What's the catch?" I asked. Martha was quiet for a moment. "Delivery window is between midnight and 3 a.m. No exceptions. And, Aloysius, just be careful on this one." I wanted to ask her what she meant, but Martha had already hung up. In 23 years of driving, she'd never told me to be careful before. The pickup went smoothly enough. The refrigeration equipment was already loaded on a trailer at a warehouse in Fresno. The manifest listed it as industrial cooling units, but the trailer felt heavier than it should for just cooling equipment. I did my pre-trip inspection, found everything in order, and hit the road as the sun was setting. The drive to LA was uneventful, but as I got closer to the delivery address, my GPS started acting strange. It kept trying to route me away from the destination, suggesting alternate routes that would have taken me in circles. Finally, I had to pull over and use an old paper map I kept in my cab. The facility wasn't marked on it, but I found the street and figured I could find the place once I got close. The industrial district at night is never a welcoming place, but this area felt particularly desolate. The streetlights were few and far between, and most of them were either broken or flickering weakly. Empty warehouses lined both sides of the road, their broken windows like dead eyes watching my truck pass. I drove slower, checking building numbers when I could find them, looking for any sign of the Grimsby facility. I almost missed it. The building was set back from the road, hidden behind a row of dead trees and a rusted chain-link fence. There was no sign, just a small placard by the gate with the number I was looking for. The gate was open, which struck me as odd for a facility that should have been closed at this hour. As I pulled into the lot, my headlights swept across the building. It was a massive, concrete structure, probably built in the 1950s, judging by the architecture. No windows except for a row of small ones near the roofline, and those were all painted black. A single loading dock was lit by a harsh sodium light that made everything look sick and yellow. I backed the trailer up to the dock and killed the engine. The sudden silence was oppressive. No traffic sounds, no industrial hum, nothing but the ticking of my cooling engine. I grabbed my paperwork and climbed out of the cab. The smell hit me immediately. It was the smell of a meat processing plant, sure, but there was something else underneath it. Something sweet and cloying that made my stomach turn. I'd smelled death before, and this was close, but not quite the same. It was like meat that had been left out too long but hadn't quite started to rot yet. I walked up the concrete steps to the loading dock door and pressed the buzzer. For a long moment, nothing happened. I was about to press it again when I heard footsteps approaching from inside. Heavy, shuffling steps that seemed to take forever to reach the door. The door opened, and I got my first look at Barnabas Clutch. He was a massive man, easily 6.5 feet tall and built like a refrigerator. His face was pale and doughy, with small deep-set eyes that didn't seem to blink often enough. He wore a stained white butcher's apron over coveralls that might have been blue once but were now a brownish-gray color. His hands, when he reached out to take my paperwork, were enormous and covered in what looked like dried blood. "You're Winthrop," he said. It wasn't a question. His voice was flat and toneless, like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. "That's right. I've got the refrigeration equipment for Ms. Grimsby." Barnabas stared at me for a long moment, then turned and shuffled back into the building. "Follow me," he said, without looking back. I hesitated. Everything about this felt wrong. The smart thing would have been to get back in my truck and leave, but double rate is double rate, and I'd never failed to complete a delivery. I followed him inside. The interior of the plant was dimly lit by industrial fluorescents, half of which were flickering or dead. The walls were covered in white tile that might have been clean once, but was now stained with rust and what I hoped was just old blood. The smell was stronger inside, mixed with industrial disinfectant that only made it worse. Barnabas led me down a long corridor lined with metal doors. Each door had a small window, but they were all fogged over or covered from the inside. As we walked, I could hear sounds from behind some of the doors. Mechanical sounds mostly, the hum of refrigeration units and the occasional clank of metal on metal. But there were other sounds too, sounds that made me walk a little faster. We turned a corner and entered what looked like the main processing floor. It was a vast space filled with stainless steel tables, conveyor belts, and hanging chains. Everything was clean, too clean, like it had just been scrubbed down. But there were drains in the floor, and those weren't clean. Dark stains surrounded each drain, and I tried not to think about what had gone down them. At the far end of the room was an office with glass walls. Inside, I could see a woman sitting behind a desk. She stood as we approached, and I got my first look at Cordelia Grimsby. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with severe features and prematurely gray hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a black dress that looked like it belonged in a different century, all high collar and long sleeves. Her skin was almost as pale as Barnabas's, like she never saw sunlight, but it was her eyes that made me take a step back. They were the palest blue I'd ever seen, almost white, and they seemed to look right through me. "Mr. Winthrop," she said, and her voice was cultured, refined, completely at odds with the grimy surroundings. "Thank you for coming. I trust you had no trouble finding us." "No trouble," I lied. She smiled, but it didn't reach those pale eyes. "Excellent. Barnabas will show you where to unload. The equipment needs to go into our specialized storage area. I'm afraid it's a bit of a walk from the dock, but Barnabas will assist you. I usually just drop the trailer and—" "No," she cut me off, and there was something in her tone that made me stop talking. "The equipment must be unloaded tonight, placed exactly where we need it. You understand, of course. Specialized equipment requires specialized handling. I wanted to argue. In 23 years, I'd never had to personally unload cargo. That's what the client's workers were for. But something about the way she was looking at me, the way Barnabas was standing just a little too close, made me just nod. "Good," she said. "Barnabas, take Mr. Winthrop to storage level 3. Storage level 3, that meant underground. Of course it did. Barnabas led me back through the processing floor to a freight elevator that looked like it hadn't been serviced since the building was constructed. The gates rattled as he pulled them closed, and the whole thing groaned as we started descending. We went down past level 1, past level 2, and kept going. Level 3 had to be at least 40 feet underground. The elevator opened onto a concrete corridor, lit by caged industrial lights. The temperature dropped at least 20 degrees, and I could see my breath misting in the air. The smell down here was different. Less meat, more chemical, like formaldehyde mixed with something organic. "This way," Barnabas said, leading me down the corridor. We passed several heavy metal doors, each with a temperature gauge next to it reading well below freezing. At the end of the corridor was a larger door, already open. Inside was a storage room filled with metal shelving units. Some of the shelves held boxes labeled in a language I didn't recognize. Others held what looked like medical equipment. IV stands, monitoring devices, things that had no business being in a meat processing plant. "Here," Barnabas said, pointing to an empty section of the room. "The equipment goes here." It took us nearly 2 hours to unload everything. The boxes were heavier than they should have been, and a few times I could have sworn I heard something shift inside them when we moved them. Barnabas never spoke except to give directions, and he moved with that same shuffling gait, like his joints didn't quite work right. As we were placing the last box, I noticed something on one of the shelves. It was a clipboard with what looked like a shipping manifest, but instead of normal cargo descriptions, it listed things like Sample Batch 47B and Preservation Trial 12. And at the bottom, in handwriting I recognized as Cordelia Grimsby's, was a note. "Winthrop arrival confirmed. Prepare subjects." Subjects, not equipment. Subjects. I pretended I hadn't seen it and helped Barnabas with the last box, but my heart was racing, and all I wanted was to get out of there. We rode the elevator back up in silence, and I walked as casually as I could back through the processing floor. Cordelia Grimsby was still in her office, watching us through the glass. She raised one hand in what might have been a wave or might have been something else. Barnabas walked me back to the loading dock. As I was about to leave, he grabbed my arm. His grip was impossibly strong and cold even through my jacket. "You need to stay," he said in that flat voice. "She wants you to stay." I pulled my arm free, my heart hammering. "I've got another delivery, thanks for the help." He stared at me for a long moment, then stepped back. "You'll come back," he said. "They always come back." I didn't run to my truck, but it was close. I started the engine and pulled out of there as fast as I could without seeming panicked. It wasn't until I was back on the highway that I realized my hands were shaking. I should have reported it, should have called the police, or at least told Martha what I'd seen. But what had I really seen? Some weird people at a meat processing plant. Some unusual equipment. Nothing that would have sounded credible to anyone who hadn't been there, hadn't felt the wrongness of that place seeping into their bones. I tried to forget about it. Completed my run to San Diego, picked up another load heading back to Fresno. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me from that place. I'd catch glimpses of white vans in my mirrors that would disappear when I looked directly at them. My CB radio would pick up strange transmissions late at night, voices speaking in that same flat tone as Barnabas Clutch, saying things like "subject relocated" and "trial continuing." 3 days after the delivery, Martha called again. "Aloysius, I've got another run for you." My blood went cold. "Not Grimsby. How did you—" She paused. "Yes, actually, Ms. Grimsby specifically requested you again. Triple rate this time." Triple rate. That was unheard of. "Martha, something's not right about that place." "I know," she said quietly, "but they're offering enough to keep the company afloat for 6 months. And they said it has to be you. What happens if I say no?" Martha was quiet for a long time. "They were very insistent, Aloysius. Very insistent." The threat was implicit but clear. I thought about my small apartment, my truck payments, my complete lack of savings. But more than that, I thought about Barnabas's words. "You'll come back. They always come back." "When?" I asked. "Tonight, same window, midnight to 3 a.m. I wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Martha to find another driver, another company, another anything. But I knew it wouldn't matter. They'd chosen me for some reason, and one way or another, I'd end up back at that plant. The second pickup was from the same warehouse in Fresno, but this time the manifest was different. Instead of refrigeration equipment, it listed organic preservation materials. The trailer was already sealed when I arrived, with a heavy padlock that I didn't have the key for. The warehouse supervisor, a nervous-looking man who wouldn't make eye contact, handed me an envelope. "Ms. Grimsby said to give you this," he said, practically throwing it at me before retreating back into his office. Inside was a key and a note in that same handwriting. "Do not open until arrival. Level 4 this time." Level 4. Deeper underground than before. The drive felt shorter this time, like the road itself wanted to deliver me to that place. My GPS didn't malfunction. It led me straight there, as if it had learned the way. The gate was open again, and this time there were more lights on in the building. As I pulled up to the loading dock, I could see shadows moving behind the painted windows on the upper floor. Barnabas was waiting for me at the dock door. He looked exactly the same. Same stained apron, same dead eyes, same shuffling gait. But this time he wasn't alone. There were 3 other workers with him, all dressed identically, all with that same pale, doughy appearance. They could have been brothers, or clones, or something else entirely. "Mr. Winthrop," Barnabas said, "she's waiting for you." They surrounded my truck before I could even get out, standing at the corners like sentinels. I had no choice but to follow Barnabas inside. The plant was different at this hour. It was running. The conveyor belts were moving, the machines were humming, and there were more workers scattered throughout the processing floor. They all had that same appearance, that same shuffling walk, and they all stopped what they were doing to watch me pass. Some of them were working with meat, but it didn't look like any beef or pork I'd ever seen. The cuts were wrong, the color was off, and the size was too familiar. Cordelia Grimsby wasn't in her office. Barnabas led me past it to another elevator. This one newer and larger than the freight elevator. We descended in silence, past level 3, past level 4, deeper than I thought the building could go. The elevator finally stopped at what the panel labeled as Special Projects. The doors opened onto a corridor that looked more like a hospital than a meat plant. White walls, white floors, fluorescent lights that hurt to look at. The chemical smell was stronger here, mixed with something else, something alive. Cordelia was waiting for us at the end of the corridor, standing in front of a set of double doors marked with biohazard symbols. "Mr. Winthrop," she said, and this time her smile was wider, showing teeth that were too white, too sharp. "I'm so pleased you returned. I knew you would. We selected you very carefully." "Selected me for what?" "To witness," she said. "To understand. To become part of something revolutionary. You see, Mr. Winthrop, we're not really in the meat processing business. That's just a cover for our real work. She gestured for Barnabas to open the double doors. What I saw beyond them made my mind rebel, made every instinct scream at me to run. But Barnabas and the other workers had closed in behind me. There was nowhere to go. The room beyond was massive, carved out of solid rock. It was filled with rows of glass cylinders, each one 7 feet tall and filled with a pale blue liquid. And floating in that liquid, preservation, Cordelia said, her voice filled with something like reverence. Perfect preservation. No decay, no deterioration. Suspended between life and death indefinitely. The things in the cylinders had once been human. I could see that much. But they'd been changed, modified. Their limbs elongated, their features smoothed out until they looked almost like Barnabas and the other workers. Some of them were moving, twitching in the liquid like they were dreaming. Our early experiments, Cordelia explained, walking between the cylinders like a teacher giving a lecture. Volunteers from the homeless population mostly, people who wouldn't be missed. But we've refined the process significantly since then. You're insane, I managed to say. Am I? We've solved death, Mr. Winthrop. Oh, not completely, not yet. But we can suspend it, hold it at bay for years, decades potentially. And when we perfect the reanimation process, she trailed off, her pale eyes gleaming. Imagine a workforce that never tires, never complains, never dies. Imagine soldiers who can be stored like equipment and awakened when needed. Imagine the possibilities. That's what Barnabas is, isn't it? One of your experiments. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh no, Mr. Winthrop. Barnabas is something else entirely. Barnabas is what happens when the process goes perfectly. Show him, Barnabas. Barnabas stepped forward and began unbuttoning his coveralls. The skin underneath wasn't skin at all. It was a patchwork of different flesh tones, sewn together with precise surgical stitches. His chest opened along a seam I hadn't noticed, revealing not organs but machinery, pumps and tubes and things I couldn't identify, all working to keep the dead flesh animated. We can rebuild them, Cordelia said proudly. Improve them. Make them better than they ever were in life. Barnabas has been operational for 3 years now. Our greatest success. I backed toward the door, but the other workers blocked my path. They were all watching me with those dead eyes, waiting for orders. Now, Cordelia continued, about your cargo. We've had a breakthrough, you see. A new preservation fluid that doesn't require refrigeration. The materials you've been transporting are the key ingredients. Very rare, very expensive, very illegal. That's why we needed someone reliable, someone who wouldn't ask questions. Someone like you. I won't be part of this. But you already are, she said. You've made 2 deliveries. Your fingerprints are on the manifest. Your truck's GPS shows you were here. If anything were to happen to our operation, you'd be implicated. Prison would be the best outcome for you. She was right. I'd been trapped from the moment I accepted that first run. What do you want from me? Regular deliveries. Once a month, sometimes more. You'll be well compensated, of course. And you'll be protected. We have friends in many places, Mr. Winthrop. Powerful friends who believe in our work. And if I refuse? She looked at the cylinders, then back at me. We always need new subjects, and you're in excellent physical condition for a man your age. You'd preserve beautifully. The threat was clear. I could work for them, or become their next experiment. There was no third option. I need time to think, I said. Of course. You have until tomorrow night. Barnabas will escort you out. The walk back through the plant was a blur. All I could think about were those things in the cylinders, suspended between life and death. And Barnabas, walking beside me, a corpse powered by machinery and God knows what else. At my truck, Barnabas handed me another envelope. "Your payment," he said in that flat voice, "and instructions for the next delivery." I took it without looking inside. As I climbed into my cab, he grabbed my arm again. "She likes you," he said. "That's rare. Don't disappoint her." I drove away from that place knowing my life as I'd known it was over. I was trapped, caught in something that was beyond my ability to fight or escape. But as I reached the highway, I made a decision. I wouldn't go to the police, they'd never believe me, and Cordelia probably owned half of them anyway. But I could gather evidence, document everything, find others who might believe me. The money in the envelope was more than I made in 3 months. Cash, untraceable, with a note that simply said, "Welcome to the family." There was also a schedule of deliveries for the next 6 months, and a cell phone with a single number programmed into it. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those cylinders, those floating bodies. Barnabas opening his chest to reveal the machinery inside. I knew I should run, leave the state, leave the country if necessary. But I also knew they'd find me. Organizations that could do what they were doing had resources I couldn't imagine. The phone rang on the 3rd day. "Mr. Winthrop." Cordelia's voice was warm, almost friendly. "I trust you've had time to consider our offer." "I don't have much choice, do I?" "We always have choices, Mr. Winthrop. Some are just more pleasant than others. Your next pickup is scheduled for Tuesday. Same warehouse, same time. The cargo will be different this time." "Different how? You'll see. Oh, and Mr. Winthrop, we'll need you to make a stop along the way to pick up some additional materials." She gave me an address in Riverside and hung up before I could respond. Tuesday came too quickly. I made the pickup in Fresno as instructed. This time, the trailer wasn't sealed, and I could see what I was hauling. Medical equipment. Hospital beds, IV stands, monitoring equipment, and a dozen large freezers, the kind used to transport organs for transplant. They were all running, connected to a generator in the trailer, and I could hear them humming as I drove. The stop in Riverside was at what looked like an abandoned clinic. A man in a suit was waiting for me in the parking lot, standing next to a refrigerated van. He didn't introduce himself, just handed me a clipboard to sign, and supervised as 4 men transferred several large coolers from the van to my trailer. The coolers were heavy and marked with biohazard symbols. One of them was leaking something dark onto the pavement. "Careful with those," the suit said. "They're fragile." "What's in them?" He looked at me like I was stupid. "You don't need to know. You don't want to know. Just deliver them intact." The drive to the Grimsby plant felt different this time. I wasn't just afraid. I was complicit. Whatever was in those coolers, I was helping transport it. I was part of their operation now, whether I wanted to be or not. This time, the plant's parking lot wasn't empty. There were several vehicles there, including a black SUV with government plates and an ambulance with its markings painted over. As I backed up to the loading dock, I could see people through the windows of the upper floor. Not the shambling workers, but normal-looking people in suits and lab coats. Barnabas met me at the dock, but he wasn't alone. There were a dozen workers with him, all with that same dead-eyed look, all moving in perfect synchronization as they began unloading my trailer. They handled the coolers with special care, carrying them like they were made of glass. "Mrs. Grimsby wants you to see the new lab," Barnabas said. It wasn't a request. He led me through the plant, but we took a different route this time. We passed through what looked like a medical facility hidden within the meat plant. clean rooms with operating tables, refrigeration units filled with containers I didn't want to identify, and observation windows looking into rooms where things that might have been human once were strapped to tables. The new lab was on level 5, even deeper than I'd been before. It was a massive space, pristine and white, filled with equipment I'd only seen in hospitals. There were more cylinders here, but these were smaller, more advanced looking, and they weren't empty. Cordelia was there, dressed in a lab coat over her black dress, supervising a team of what looked like real scientists. When she saw me, she smiled that too-sharp smile. "Mr. Winthrop, perfect timing. We're about to begin a new phase of testing." They wheeled in a gurney. There was someone on it, covered by a sheet but clearly alive. I could see them breathing. One of the scientists pulled back the sheet, and I recognized him. It was the warehouse supervisor from Fresno, the nervous man who'd given me the first envelope. "He was asking too many questions," Cordelia explained casually. "But waste not, want not. He'll serve a better purpose now." I watched, frozen in horror, as they began hooking him up to machines. He was conscious, but paralyzed, his eyes darting frantically as they inserted tubes and wires into his body. "The process is quite fascinating," Cordelia said, moving to stand beside me. "First, we replace the blood with our preservation fluid. It's a gradual process, too fast and the body goes into shock. Then we begin the cellular modifications. Each organ is treated separately, optimized for its new function." "You're torturing him." "No, Mr. Winthrop, we're improving him. In a few hours, he'll be beyond pain, beyond fear, beyond all the weaknesses that make us human." The man on the table was trying to scream, but no sound came out. They'd done something to his vocal cords. I could see the terror in his eyes as the preservation fluid began flowing into his veins, watch his skin gradually taking on that pale, waxy appearance I'd seen on Barnabas and the others. "The coolers you brought contain the catalyst," Cordelia continued, "harvested from our successful subjects. It helps the new preservation fluid bond with living tissue. Without it, the process would take weeks. With it, we can complete a transformation in hours. Those coolers, what exactly did I transport?" She looked at me with those pale eyes. "Essence, Mr. Winthrop. The distilled essence of what makes our subjects special. Brain tissue, spinal fluid, other materials, all voluntarily donated, of course." Her smile said otherwise. I couldn't watch anymore. I turned to leave, but Barnabas blocked my path. "You need to understand," Cordelia said, her voice harder now. "This is the future. Governments are interested. Militaries are interested. Very powerful people want what we're creating here. And you're part of it now, an essential part. I'm just a truck driver. No, Mr. Winthrop. You're our logistics specialist, our connection to the outside world. The authorities don't suspect truck drivers. They don't check refrigerated trailers carrying meat processing equipment. You can go places and transport things that we cannot." She gestured to one of the scientists, who brought over a metal briefcase. "Your next delivery will be different," she said. "You'll be taking some of our subjects to a facility in Nevada. They'll be in specially designed containers, maintaining perfect preservation during transport. The briefcase contains everything you need to know. I won't transport people. They're not people anymore, Mr. Winthrop. They're products. And you will transport them because the alternative—" She looked at the man on the table who had stopped moving. His skin was now completely white, his eyes staring at nothing. "Well, we already have your measurements." I took the briefcase. What else could I do? The drive back to my apartment was a nightmare of guilt and fear. I'd become exactly what I'd always despised, someone who looked the other way, who followed orders no matter how wrong they were. But I also knew that my only chance of stopping this was to stay on the inside, to gather evidence, to find someone who could help. That night, I opened the briefcase. Inside were detailed instructions for the transport, including refrigeration requirements, monitoring protocols, and emergency procedures if a subject began to reactivate during transport. There were also photos of the subjects I'd be transporting. They all looked like Barnabas now, pale, expressionless, caught somewhere between life and death. At the bottom of the briefcase was another envelope with more money and a note. Your cooperation is appreciated. Your discretion is required. Your loyalty will be rewarded. The Nevada run was scheduled for the following week. I spent those days trying to find a way out, some authority I could turn to, but every avenue led to dead ends. The local police dismissed my calls as prank. The FBI office wouldn't even let me pass the reception desk. A journalist I contacted stopped returning my calls after one conversation. Either nobody believed me, or Cordelia's reach was longer than I'd imagined. The night before the run, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my truck, parked outside my apartment, staring at the briefcase. The rational part of my mind kept saying this couldn't be real, that secret experiments and reanimated corpses belonged in horror movies, not in industrial districts outside Los Angeles. But I'd seen it. I'd seen Barnabas open his chest. I'd seen those things in the cylinders. I'd watched them transform that warehouse supervisor into one of them. The pickup was scheduled for 2 a.m. I arrived at the plant at 1:30, hoping to load quickly and leave. But the parking lot was full of vehicles, military trucks, unmarked vans, expensive cars with tinted windows. Something big was happening. Barnabas met me at the gate, but he looked different. His movements were smoother, more natural, and his face had been modified. The features were more refined, more human-looking. If I hadn't known what he was, I might have been fooled. "Special night," he said, and even his voice sounded more natural. "Important visitors. You'll need to wait." He led me not to the loading dock but to the main entrance. Inside, the plant had been transformed. The processing floor had been cleared and cleaned, turned into something like an exhibition hall. There were displays showing the evolution of their work, cylinders containing subjects at various stages of transformation, and video screens showing what looked like military applications for their products. There were at least 50 people there, all in expensive suits or military uniforms. They walked among the displays like they were at a trade show, discussing the subjects like they were comparing cars or weapons systems. I recognized one of them, a senator from California whose face was always on the news. He was examining one of the cylinders with what looked like professional interest. Cordelia appeared at my elbow, dressed in an elegant black gown that made her look like something out of a Victorian funeral. "Mr. Winthrop, so glad you could join us. This is our quarterly demonstration for potential investors and clients. Would you like to see our latest achievement?" She didn't wait for an answer, just guided me to a raised platform at the center of the room. On it was a single cylinder, larger than the others, containing something that made my blood freeze. It was a child, or had been a child, maybe 10 years old, suspended in that blue fluid, but modified in ways that made my stomach turn. Its limbs had been elongated, its features smoothed and made uniform like the others, but there was something else. Its eyes were open, tracking the movement of people around the cylinder. It was aware. "Our youngest subject to date," Cordelia announced to the gathered crowd. "Proof that the process works regardless of age. Imagine the applications. Children who never grow old, never get sick, never die. Perfect preservation of youth itself." The crowd murmured appreciatively. Some even applauded. I wanted to scream, to smash the cylinder, to do something, anything. But I just stood there, paralyzed by horror and the knowledge that I was surrounded by people who saw nothing wrong with this. "The transport tonight will include this subject," Cordelia whispered to me. "Our Nevada facility specializes in pediatric applications. They're very excited to receive it." "I won't do it," I said, finding my voice at last. "I won't transport a child." She looked at me with those pale eyes, and for the first time, I saw genuine surprise there. "Mr. Winthrop, it's not a child anymore. It's a successful experiment, a product, and you will transport it, because if you don't—" She gestured to someone in the crowd. A man approached us. He was ordinary-looking, middle-aged, wearing a simple suit. But when he smiled, I recognized something in his expression. He had the same look as Cordelia, that same wrongness behind his eyes. "This is Mr. Smith," Cordelia said. "He handles our personnel issues. Mr. Smith, Mr. Winthrop is having second thoughts about his employment." Smith studied me like I was a specimen. "That's unfortunate. Mr. Winthrop, do you have any family, anyone who would miss you if you disappeared?" The threat was clear. But something in me snapped. 23 years of keeping my head down, of just doing my job, of not asking questions. It all fell away. "No," I said. "No family, no one who'd miss me. But that doesn't mean I'll help you anymore." Smith's smile widened. "Everyone has someone, Mr. Winthrop. That nice dispatcher of yours, Martha, your drinking buddy, Carl, at the truck stop in Bakersfield. The waitress, Susan, who always saves you a piece of pie at that diner in Fresno. Should I continue?" They'd been watching me, learning about everyone in my life, however peripheral. The message was clear. Refuse, and it wouldn't just be me who paid the price. "The shipment will be ready in an hour," Cordelia said, dismissing me. "Barnabas will help you load." I spent that hour walking through the displays, forcing myself to look at what they'd done. There were charts showing success rates, graphs of preservation times, even a cost-benefit analysis of traditional employees versus their modified workforce. It was all so clinical, so businesslike. They'd industrialized horror. Finally, mercifully, it was time to load. The subjects were in specialized containers that looked like oversized coffins, each one temperature-controlled and monitored. There were 6 of them, including the child. Barnabas and his fellow workers loaded them with mechanical precision while I stood by my truck, trying not to think about what was inside those containers. As they loaded the last one, I heard something, a tapping from inside one of the containers. Rhythmic, deliberate, Morse code. I'd learned it in the Army years ago, and while I was rusty, I could make out the pattern. HELP. One of them was still conscious, still aware, still human enough to ask for help. I looked at Barnabas, but his face showed no reaction. Either he hadn't heard it or didn't care. The tapping continued as they secured the container in my trailer. HELP, over and over. "Drive carefully," Barnabas said as they closed the trailer doors. "The road to Nevada can be treacherous at night." I climbed into my cab, started the engine, and pulled out of that hellish place. The tapping continued, transmitted through the trailer into the cab. HELP, HELP, HELP. I made it about 10 miles before I pulled over. I couldn't do it. I couldn't deliver those people, because that's what they still were, people, to another facility where God knows what would be done to them. But I also couldn't just let them go. They were transformed, possibly dangerous, and definitely being tracked. I sat there on the side of the highway listening to that desperate tapping, trying to figure out what to do. That's when I noticed the headlights in my mirror, a black SUV, maintaining a steady distance behind me. They were following me, making sure I completed the delivery. I had two choices: complete the delivery and remain part of this nightmare, or find a way to end it, even if it meant ending myself. I made my decision. I got back on the highway and drove, but not toward Nevada. I headed east, toward the desert, toward the most isolated area I knew. The SUV followed, maintaining that steady distance. They probably had GPS trackers on the containers, knew exactly where I was going. But they didn't intervene. Not yet. About 50 miles into the desert, I found what I was looking for. An abandoned quarry I'd passed years ago on a different run. It was miles from anything, a massive pit carved into the earth. I turned off the highway and headed down the access road. The SUV followed, closing the distance now. They knew something was wrong. I reached the edge of the quarry and stopped. It was at least 200 feet to the bottom, nothing but rocks and debris below. I got out of the cab and walked to the edge, looking down into that darkness. The SUV pulled up behind my truck, and Smith got out, along with two other men. "Mr. Winthrop," Smith called out, his voice carrying in the desert silence. "This is unnecessary. Get back in your truck and complete your delivery." "No," I said. "We'll destroy everyone you care about. Then you'll have to find someone else to be your delivery boy." I'd uncoupled the trailer before they could stop me. It takes knowledge to do it quickly, and I had 23 years of practice. The trailer was balanced on the edge now, tons of weight ready to tip. "Stop!" Smith shouted, but it was too late. I kicked the landing gear and the trailer tilted. The containers inside shifted, and that was enough. The whole thing went over, falling into the darkness. I heard the crash, the sound of metal tearing and containers bursting open. Smith had a gun on me now, his face twisted with rage. "You have no idea what you've just cost us, what you've destroyed." "Good," I said. He pulled the trigger. I survived, obviously, or I wouldn't be telling this story. The bullet caught me in the shoulder, spun me around, and I fell. Not into the quarry, thankfully, but onto the rocks at the edge. Smith and his men thought I was dead or close enough. They had bigger problems, recovering what they could from the destroyed shipment, covering up the incident, explaining the loss to their investors. They left me there to die. But truckers are tough, and I was tougher than most. I managed to crawl back to the cab of my truck, used the emergency kit to stop the bleeding, and drove myself to a hospital 3 hours away. I told them I'd been shot by hijackers trying to steal my cargo. The police investigated, but found nothing. The quarry had been filled in, the evidence buried under tons of rock and dirt. The Grimsby meat processing facility burned down 2 weeks later. Electrical fire, according to the official report. No casualties, no evidence of what had really gone on there. Cordelia Grimsby disappeared, along with Barnabas and all the others. Smith vanished too, like he'd never existed. But I know they're still out there. Sometimes I'll stop at a truck stop and see a driver who moves a little too stiffly, whose skin is a little too pale. I'll catch glimpses of refrigerated trucks heading to addresses that don't exist, carrying cargo that isn't what the manifest claims. And sometimes, late at night, my phone will ring and there will be nothing but silence on the other end. Or worse, that flat, toneless voice asking when I'll be ready to make my next delivery. I don't drive trucks anymore. Can't, really, not with my shoulder the way it is. But even if I could, I wouldn't. Because I know what's out there, moving in those refrigerated trailers along the dark highways. I know what's being transported in the dead of night to facilities that don't officially exist. And I know that somewhere in some other industrial district, in some other anonymous building, Cordelia Grimsby is still conducting her experiments. Still transforming people into things that shouldn't exist. Still creating her perfect, preserved workforce. I've told this story to anyone who would listen. Journalists, investigators, other truckers. Most don't believe me. Those who do are too scared to do anything about it. But I keep telling it, hoping that someday someone will investigate, will expose what's really happening. Until then, if you're ever driving late at night and you see a refrigerated truck heading to nowhere, taking roads that don't make sense, stay away from it. Don't follow it. Don't investigate. Because you might not like what you find inside. And if you ever get a delivery request from Grimsby Meat Processing or any company that Cordelia Grimsby is associated with, refuse it. No amount of money is worth becoming part of that horror. Trust me, I know. Some cargo should never be delivered, and some truths should never be discovered. But they're out there, moving through the night, one delivery at a time. And there's nothing any of us can do to stop them. The only thing we can do is refuse to be part of it, refuse to look the other way, refuse to just do our jobs when our jobs require us to become monsters. I failed that test. I made those deliveries, transported those horrors, enabled their experiments. The blood on my hands will never wash clean, no matter how many times I tell this story, no matter how many warnings I give. All I can do now is hope that others will be stronger than I was, that when faced with that choice, comply or resist, they'll choose resistance no matter the cost, because the cost of compliance is your soul. And once that's gone, you might as well be floating in one of those cylinders, neither alive nor dead, just another product in Cordelia Grimsby's catalog of horrors. My name is Thaddeus Pickford, and I've been hauling containers out of the Port of Los Angeles for 17 years. In all that time, through thousands of pickups and deliveries, I thought I'd seen everything the docks had to offer. The occasional smuggling attempt, containers with false walls, shipments that didn't match their manifests, it was all part of the game. But what happened on that foggy October night in 2018 changed everything I thought I knew about the cargo moving through America's busiest port. I should start by explaining how the port works for those who've never been there. The Port of LA is massive, 7,500 acres of terminals, warehouses, and rail yards. During the day, it's organized chaos with thousands of trucks moving in and out, cranes working non-stop, and ships being loaded and unloaded around the clock. At night, though, it becomes a different place. The fog rolls in from the Pacific, turning the towering crane lights into ghostly halos. The stacks of containers become maze-like corridors where sound echoes strangely and you can get lost even with GPS. I actually preferred working nights. Less traffic, better pay, and most importantly, less bureaucracy. The night shift supervisors knew their drivers and trusted us to get the job done without constant oversight. That trust would prove to be a problem on this particular night. The call came in around 9 p.m. from my dispatcher, Hank. I was already at the port, having just dropped off an empty container at Terminal Island. "Thaddeus, I've got a priority pickup for you," Hank said, his voice crackling through the CB. "Container ZGLU 8974432. It's at Pier 47, Stack C, Row 15. I wrote down the number. "What's the cargo?" Manifest says industrial equipment bound for a warehouse in Vernon. The client's paying triple rate for immediate delivery. Triple rate was unusual but not unheard of, especially for time-sensitive cargo. Why the rush? Customs holdup. Container's been sitting there for 2 weeks, and they just cleared it an hour ago. Client wants it moved before the morning shift comes in. That should have been my first red flag. Customs doesn't usually clear containers at night, and they certainly don't rush to do it. But triple rate was triple rate, and I had alimony payments to make. "Send me the paperwork," I said. "Already in your inbox. Oh, and Thaddeus, You'll need to check in with the night supervisor at Pier 47. Woman named Prudence Blackwood. She's new, transferred from the Long Beach terminal last month. I'd never heard of her, which was odd. I knew most of the supervisors at the port, even the ones I didn't work with regularly. But terminals were always shuffling personnel around, so I didn't think much of it. The drive to Pier 47 took about 20 minutes. The fog was thicker than usual that night, reducing visibility to maybe 30 feet. The port's sodium lights created an orange glow that made everything look sick and unnatural. As I drove, I noticed there were fewer trucks than normal. Usually, even at night, you'd see dozens of rigs moving around, but tonight I only passed 2 or 3. Pier 47 was at the far eastern edge of the port, one of the older sections that was scheduled for renovation. The cargo stacks here were older, rustier, and packed more tightly together. The overhead cranes were ancient by port standards, creaking and groaning even when they weren't moving. The supervisor's office was a small, prefabricated building at the entrance to the pier. I parked and walked up the metal steps, my footsteps echoing in the fog. Through the window, I could see someone sitting at a desk, illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights inside. I knocked and entered. The woman behind the desk looked up, and I got my first look at Prudence Blackwood. She was probably in her 50s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was angular, almost gaunt, with deep-set eyes that seemed to look through rather than at you. She wore a supervisor's uniform, but it looked wrong on her somehow, like she was playing dress-up. There was something about the way she sat, perfectly still, hands folded on the desk, that made me uncomfortable. "Mr. Pickford," she said, before I could introduce myself. Her voice was cultured, with a slight accent I couldn't place. "I've been expecting you. Ma'am, I'm here for container ZGLU 8974432. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, the special container. It's been waiting for you." She stood and walked to a filing cabinet, moving with an odd, gliding motion that seemed too smooth. She pulled out a folder and handed it to me. Inside were the standard release forms, but also something else, a waiver I'd never seen before. "What's this?" I asked, reading through the dense legal text. "Insurance waiver. The container's contents are delicate. The client wants to ensure there's no liability if anything is damaged during transport." I've never had to sign anything like this before. Her smile widened slightly. "It's a new policy for high-value shipments, you understand." I didn't understand, but I needed this job. I signed the waiver and handed it back. "Excellent," she said. "The container is in row 15, as specified. However, I should mention that there's been a slight complication." "What kind of complication?" "The container next to yours, ZGLU 8974431, was also cleared by customs. The numbers are very similar, and in this fog, mistakes can happen. Make absolutely certain you take the correct one, 8974432. I've been doing this for 17 years, ma'am. I know how to read container numbers." "Of course. But mistakes do happen, especially at night. And the contents of 8974431 are, well, let's just say it would be very unfortunate if the wrong container were opened." Something about the way she said "unfortunate" made my skin crawl, but I just nodded and headed back to my truck. The drive into the container stacks was like entering a maze. The fog was so thick now that I could barely see the containers on either side of me. My headlights created a tunnel of light that seemed to be swallowed by the gray wall ahead. I drove slowly, counting rows, checking numbers spray-painted on the ground. Row 15 was at the very back of the stack, pressed up against the fence that separated the port from the industrial wasteland beyond. I found the spot and got out to check the container numbers. Sure enough, there were 2 containers side by side. ZGLU 8974431 and ZGLU 8974432. In the fog and dim light, they looked identical. Both were standard 40-foot containers, painted the same faded blue, with the same shipping line logos. The only difference was that single digit in their numbers. I walked around to the back of 8974432, my assigned container, to check the customs seal. It had been cut, as expected, with a Newport seal in its place. Everything looked normal. But as I was walking back to my truck to position it for pickup, I heard something. It was faint, barely audible over the distant sounds of the port, but it sounded like scratching, coming from inside one of the containers. I stopped and listened. There it was again, a rhythmic scratching, like metal on metal. I walked closer to the containers, trying to determine which one the sound was coming from. As I got closer to 8974431, the wrong container, the scratching got louder. Then it stopped abruptly, as if whatever was making the noise had heard me approach. I stood there in the fog, my heart beating faster than it should have been. Containers sometimes made noise, shifting cargo, temperature changes causing metal to expand and contract. But this had sounded deliberate, purposeful. I shook my head and went back to my truck. I had a job to do, and whatever was in 8974431 wasn't my problem. I maneuvered my rig into position and began the process of loading 8974432 onto my chassis. The port's ancient crane groaned as it lifted the container, and I guided it into place with practiced ease. As I was securing the container to my trailer, I noticed something odd. There were scratch marks on the side of 8974431, the container I wasn't supposed to take. Long, parallel gouges in the metal, like something had been trying to claw its way out. They looked fresh, the exposed metal still bright against the faded paint. I finished securing my container and climbed back into my cab, eager to get away from this place. As I started to pull away, my headlights swept across 8974431 one more time. For just a moment, I could have sworn I saw the container door bulge outward, like something inside had thrown itself against it. I drove out of the stacks faster than was safe, my hands gripping the wheel tightly. At the supervisor's office, I was supposed to check out with Prudence Blackwood, but the lights were off and the door was locked. I'd never known a supervisor to leave their post during a shift, but I wasn't about to go looking for her. I drove through the gate and onto the street, heading for Vernon. The warehouse district in Vernon is only about 15 miles from the port, but that night it felt like 100. The fog followed me inland, unusual for October, and my container seemed heavier than it should have been. I could feel it pulling at my truck on turns, shifting in ways that didn't make sense for secured industrial equipment. About halfway to Vernon, I heard the scratching again. This time, it was definitely coming from my container. I turned off the radio and listened. Scratch, 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 pause, scratch, scratch, scratch. It had a rhythm to it, almost like Morse code. I pulled over at a truck stop to investigate. I grabbed my flashlight and walked back to the container. The scratching was louder now, coming from inside. I checked the manifest again, industrial equipment. Maybe something had come loose during transport. I climbed up on the chassis to check the container doors. The seal was intact, but I noticed something I hadn't seen before. There were small holes drilled in the side of the container, near the top. Ventilation holes. Industrial equipment doesn't need ventilation. That's when I heard the voice. It was muffled, barely audible through the metal walls, but it was definitely a human voice. Someone was speaking inside the container, but not in English. It sounded like Chinese or maybe Vietnamese. Then another voice joined in, and another. There were people in my container. My first thought was human trafficking. It happened more often than people knew. Desperate souls packed into containers, hoping to make it to America. But this didn't feel right. The voices didn't sound desperate or frightened. They sounded wrong. Monotone, repetitive, like they were chanting. I climbed down and got back in my truck. I should have called the police right then, but something held me back. Maybe it was the waiver I'd signed. Maybe it was Prudence Blackwood's warning about taking the wrong container. Or maybe it was just fear. But I kept driving. The warehouse in Vernon was in an industrial complex that looked abandoned. No lights except for a single security lamp over a roll-up door. The address matched my paperwork, but there were no signs, no company names, nothing to indicate what kind of business operated here. I pulled up to the loading dock and honked my horn. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the roll-up door began to rise, revealing a dark interior. A man stepped out into the light, and I immediately wished I'd never taken this job. He was tall and thin, wearing a black suit that looked expensive but old-fashioned, like something from the 1950s. His face was pale and angular, with features that seemed slightly off, like they'd been arranged by someone who'd never seen a human face before. But it was his eyes that made me grip the steering wheel tighter. They were completely black, no whites, no iris, just black orbs that reflected the security light like oil. "Mr. Pickford," he said, and his voice was cultured like Prudence Blackwood's, with that same unplaceable accent. "You're late." I checked my watch. I was actually 15 minutes early. "Traffic," I lied. He smiled, revealing teeth that were too white and too sharp. "No matter. You have our container? ZGLU 8974432 as requested." "Excellent. Please back into the warehouse. We'll handle the unloading." I started to back up, but then stopped. "I'll need to see some ID. Company policy." His smile faded. "That won't be necessary." "Actually, it is. I can't release the container without proper identification." He reached into his jacket, and for a moment I thought he was going for a weapon, but he pulled out a wallet and showed me a driver's license. The name read John Smith, which was obviously fake, but the photo was what caught my attention. It was him, but different. The features were human, normal. It was like looking at two different people at once, the photo showing what he should look like, while my eyes saw something else. "Satisfied?" he asked. I nodded and continued backing into the warehouse. Inside, I could see more people, all dressed similarly, all with that same wrong appearance. They stood perfectly still, watching my truck with those black eyes. As soon as I was inside, the door rolled down behind me, trapping me in the warehouse with them. My heart was pounding now, every instinct screaming at me to get out of there. But there was nowhere to go. "Release the container," John Smith said. I climbed out of my cab, trying to keep my movements calm and professional. As I began unlocking the container from my chassis, I heard the scratching again, louder now, more insistent. The people in the warehouse heard it too. They began moving closer, surrounding the container, their movements synchronized like they were all controlled by the same puppeteer. "What's in there?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "The future," John Smith said. "The next phase of human evolution, or perhaps devolution, depending on your perspective." The container was free now, sitting on its own legs in the warehouse. The scratching had become pounding, something inside desperate to get out, or maybe desperate to stay in. "Open it," Smith commanded. "That's not my job. I just deliver—" "Open it," he repeated, and this time there was something in his voice that made my body move without my permission. I found myself walking to the container doors, my hands reaching for the handle. "Wait," I said, fighting against whatever compulsion was making me move. "This is the wrong container." Smith's head snapped toward me, those black eyes narrowing. What? The number. I was supposed to deliver 897-4432. This is 897-4431. I looked at the container number and my blood went cold. It was 897-4431. The wrong container. The one with the scratch marks. The one Prudence Blackwood had warned me about. "You fool," Smith hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Before I could answer, the container doors exploded outward. What came out of that container still haunts my dreams, even after all this time. They were human, or had been once. But something had been done to them. Something that had twisted them into things that shouldn't exist. There were 12 of them, men and women, though it was hard to tell which was which anymore. Their bodies had been modified, stretched, and reshaped. Their arms were too long, hanging down past their knees, ending in hands with too many fingers. Their faces were the worst part, features rearranged like a child's drawing, eyes where they shouldn't be, mouths that opened sideways, noses that were just holes in their flesh. But it was the way they moved that made my mind rebel. They didn't walk. They scuttled, using their elongated arms like extra legs, moving with a horrible spider-like grace. And they were fast, faster than anything human should be. The first one out of the container went straight for John Smith. It happened so quickly I barely saw it. One moment, Smith was standing there. The next, he was on the ground with one of those things on top of him. Smith screamed, but it wasn't a human scream. It was a sound like metal tearing, like a machine dying. The other people in the warehouse, the ones who looked like Smith, didn't run. They formed a circle and began chanting in that language I'd heard earlier. Their voices rose in unison, and the air in the warehouse began to change. It got thick, heavy, like the pressure before a storm. The things from the container reacted to the chanting. Some of them stopped their attack, writhing on the floor like they were in pain, but others seemed to become even more aggressive, launching themselves at the chanters with inhuman shrieks. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I ran for my truck, jumping into the cab and starting the engine. But the warehouse door was still closed, and the control panel was on the far side of the building, past the fighting. One of the container things noticed me. It turned its head, too far, almost completely around, and fixed multiple eyes on me. Then it started scuttling toward my truck, its two long arms pulling it forward with horrifying speed. I threw the truck in reverse and gunned it, smashing through the warehouse door. Metal screamed and tore, but I made it through, backing out into the night. In my mirrors I could see the chaos inside the warehouse. Things that used to be human fighting things that pretended to be human, while reality itself seemed to bend around them. I didn't stop. I drove straight out of that industrial complex, my destroyed trailer dragging behind me, sparks flying from the twisted metal. I made it about 3 miles before the engine gave out, damaged from the impact. I coasted to a stop on a dark street and immediately called 911. 911, what's your emergency? There's been an incident at a warehouse in Vernon, I said, my voice shaking. People are hurt, maybe dead. You need to send everyone. I gave them the address and hung up before they could ask questions. Then I called Hank, my dispatcher. Thaddeus, how'd the delivery go? Hank, what the hell did you send me into? What are you talking about? The container, the client, none of it was normal. There were things in that container. People, but not people. Hank was quiet for a moment. Thaddeus, are you drunk? I'm not drunk. Check your records. Who requested this pickup? Who's the client? I heard typing on the other end. That's weird. The record's been deleted. All I have is the container number and your delivery confirmation. I didn't confirm anything. The delivery went bad, Hank, really bad. Where's the container now? At the warehouse, probably. Along with whatever those things were. Things? Thaddeus, you're not making sense. I tried to explain, but I could hear the skepticism in his voice. He thought I'd lost it, maybe had a breakdown. Finally, he told me to go home and sleep it off, that we'd sort it out in the morning. I abandoned my damaged truck and called an Uber. As we drove away, I saw emergency vehicles racing toward Vernon, police cars, ambulances, even a hazmat team. Whatever was happening at that warehouse, the authorities were taking it seriously. The next morning, I checked the news, expecting to see reports of the incident. But there was nothing. No mention of a warehouse, no reports of injuries or deaths. I drove back to Vernon in my personal vehicle to check the location. The warehouse was gone, not damaged or closed off, gone. The lot was empty, like the building had never existed. I went to the port to ask about the container, but there was no record of ZJLU 8974431 or 8974432. The shipping line had no containers with those numbers. Pier 47 had no supervisor named Prudence Blackwood. According to every official record, none of it had ever happened. But I knew it had. I had the damage to my truck to prove it, though the insurance company attributed it to a hit and run. And I had the memories, the nightmares that woke me up every night. I tried to go back to work, to pretend everything was normal. But I couldn't. Every container looked suspicious. Every nighttime pickup felt like a trap. I started seeing things that weren't there, or maybe were there but shouldn't be. People with those black eyes watching me at truck stops. Containers with ventilation holes that didn't belong. Supervisors who moved too smoothly and spoke with that same unplaceable accent. 3 weeks after the incident, I got a call from an unknown number. "Mr. Pickford," a familiar voice said. It was Prudence Blackwood. "I'm disappointed in you. How did you get this number? You took the wrong container. Despite my very specific warning, you took the wrong one. I took the one you told me to take. 8974432. No, Mr. Pickford. You took 8974431. A simple mistake, but one with serious consequences. What were those things?" She was quiet for a moment. Failed experiments. Subjects that didn't respond well to the modification process. They were being transported for disposal. Modification process. Humanity is evolving, Mr. Pickford. Or rather, being evolved. Some handle the transition better than others. The ones in 8974431 were failures. Unstable. Dangerous. They should never have been released. And the other container? The one I was supposed to take. Successful subjects. Stable. Compliant. Ready for integration into society. You'd be surprised how many modified humans are already among you, Mr. Pickford. Teachers, police officers, politicians. All looking perfectly normal. All working toward the same goal. Which is? The transformation of the human species. The next step in our evolution. Or, if you prefer, our replacement. My hand was shaking as I held the phone. You're insane. Am I? Look around you, Mr. Pickford. The world is changing. Humans are becoming obsolete. We're simply accelerating the process. I'll go to the authorities. She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Which authorities? The ones we haven't already converted? They won't believe you, and even if they did, what would you tell them? That you delivered a container full of monsters? That there are fake humans infiltrating society? You'd be institutionalized within a week. She was right, and I knew it. What do you want from me? Nothing anymore. You've served your purpose, albeit incorrectly. But we're patient. We have other drivers, other containers, other ports. The process continues with or without you. Then why call me? To deliver a message. Stop looking for answers. Stop trying to investigate. Live your life, what's left of it, and be grateful we're allowing you that courtesy. Because if you continue to be a problem, we'll have to deal with you. And I promise you won't enjoy our methods." The line went dead. I wanted to ignore her warning, to fight back somehow. But what could I do? I was one truck driver against whatever they were. So I did the only thing I could do. I quit. Walked away from trucking entirely. Moved to a different state. Tried to start over. But they were right about one thing. Once you know what's out there, you can't unknow it. You start seeing the signs everywhere. The people who move just a little too smoothly. The containers that arrive at night with no proper documentation. The warehouses that exist one day and vanish the next. I tried to leave it all behind, I really did. After quitting my job at the port, I moved to Colorado, about as far from the ocean and shipping containers as I could get. I found work at a local delivery company, driving small trucks, handling normal packages for normal people. For about 6 months, I almost convinced myself that what happened in LA had been some kind of breakdown, a stress-induced hallucination. But then I started noticing things in Denver, too. It began with a delivery to a medical research facility on the outskirts of the city. The building was new, all glass and steel, with a name that sounded like random letters strung together. KTCM Biomedical Solutions. As I was unloading packages at their receiving dock, I saw them. 3 containers, the same faded blue as the ones from the port, sitting in their parking lot. No trucks attached, no company markings, just sitting there like they'd been dropped from the sky. I tried to ignore them, but as I was signing the delivery confirmation, I heard it. That same scratching sound from inside one of the containers. The receiving clerk, a young woman with perfectly normal features and perfectly normal smile, noticed me looking. "Specialized equipment," she said, though I hadn't asked. "Very delicate. Very important." Her voice had a slight accent I couldn't place. I got out of there as fast as I could, but the damage was done. I'd been found, or I'd found them, or maybe they were everywhere and I'd just started noticing. Either way, my quiet life in Colorado was over. The phone calls started again a week later. No one speaking, just breathing on the other end. Sometimes I'd hear that chanting in the background, the same rhythmic sounds from the warehouse. My apartment began to feel watched. I'd come home to find things slightly moved. A chair turned a different direction, a window open that I knew I'd closed, footprints in the carpet that weren't mine. Then, one night in February 2019, I woke up to find Prudence Blackwood sitting in my bedroom chair, watching me sleep. I reached for the baseball bat I kept beside my bed, but she just laughed. Now, Mr. Pickford, is that any way to greet an old friend? Get out of my apartment." "I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, we have a problem. The subjects you released in Los Angeles, they're still alive, still free, and they're reproducing." That word, reproducing, made my skin crawl. "That's not my problem." "Oh, but it is. You release them, you're responsible for what they do, and what they're doing is quite problematic. They're hunting our stable subjects, killing them, and worse, they're creating more of their kind." "Creating?" She stood and walked to my window, looking out at the Denver skyline. "The modification process that created them, it's contagious under certain circumstances. When they feed on normal humans, sometimes the victims don't die. They change, become like them, twisted, unstable, uncontrollable." "You're lying." She turned to face me, and in the moonlight I could see her face clearly for the first time. It was human, but only technically. The features were too symmetrical, too perfect, like a computer's idea of what a human should look like. "I wish I were. In the 3 months since you released them, They've created at least 40 more of their kind. They're spreading through the homeless populations, the people no one notices when they disappear. But soon they'll get bolder. Soon they'll start taking people who will be missed. And when that happens, when the authorities start investigating, they'll trace it back to that warehouse, to that container, to you. The authorities won't find anything. You made sure of that. We cleaned up the immediate scene, yes, but we can't erase everything. Security footage from nearby buildings, traffic cameras that caught your damaged truck, credit card records from your Uber ride. If someone looks hard enough, they'll find the trail, and it will lead to you. I sat up in bed, the bat still in my hands. What do you want? Your help. You release them, you can help us recapture them. I'm not helping you do anything. She smiled, that same cold smile from the port. I thought you might say that, so I brought some incentive. She pulled out her phone and showed me a video. It was my ex-wife, Sarah, walking out of her house in Phoenix. The video was dated yesterday. You wouldn't, I said. We prefer not to involve innocents, but if you don't help us, we'll have no choice. Sarah will make excellent leverage, or perhaps raw material for our experiments. The choice is yours. I wanted to kill her right then, but I knew it wouldn't help. There were more of them, many more, and they knew where everyone I cared about lived. What do you need me to do? The escaped subjects have a connection to you. You were the first normal human they saw after their containment. They've been following you, Mr. Pickford. Even here in Denver. They're drawn to you, though we don't fully understand why. Following me? Oh yes, they're here in the city, at least 3 of them. They watch you, just as we watch you. But they haven't approached. We think they're waiting for something. Waiting for what? We don't know. But we're going to use that connection. You're going to be bait. She explained the plan. I would go about my normal routine, but with their people watching. When the escaped subjects made contact, I would lead them to a containment site where they could be recaptured. Simple, clean, no civilian casualties. And if I do this, you'll leave me alone? If you do this successfully, we'll ensure you never hear from us again. New identity, new life, somewhere far from all of this. We might even let you forget. Let me forget. We have methods, ways to suppress memories, to make all of this seem like a bad dream. You could go back to being just a truck driver, living a simple life, never knowing what lurks in the shadows. It was tempting, God, it was tempting, to forget all of this, to go back to ignorance. Fine, I said, I'll do it. Prudence stood to leave, then paused at my bedroom door. Oh, and Mr. Pickford, don't try to run, don't try to warn anyone. We're always watching, always. She left, but her presence lingered like a bad smell. The next few days were surreal. I went to work, made my deliveries, went home, all while knowing I was being watched by multiple parties. I could feel eyes on me constantly. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses, a figure on a rooftop that shouldn't be there, someone in a car that was always 3 vehicles behind me, shadows moving in alleys when there was no one to cast them. On the 4th night, they made contact. I was walking to my truck after my shift when I heard the scratching. That same rhythmic scratching from the container, coming from the parking garage's lower level. Every instinct told me to run, but I remembered Sarah, remembered the threat. So I walked toward the sound. I found it in the darkest corner of the garage, crouched between 2 cars. One of the escaped subjects, though it had changed since that night in the warehouse. Its elongated arms were even longer now, dragging on the ground. Its rearranged face had sprouted new features, extra eyes that blinked independently, a second mouth that whispered constantly in that unknown language. But when it saw me, it didn't attack. It tilted its head too far, that horrible, too far tilt, and spoke. "Pickford," it said, the word distorted by its malformed mouth but still understandable. "You freed us." I backed against a car, my hand reaching for my phone to signal Prudence's team, but the thing moved faster, one of those long arms shooting out to grab my wrist. Its grip was gentle, though I could feel the strength behind it. "No," it said. Must listen. What do you want?" "They lie," it said, struggling with each word. "Blackwood, Smith, all lie. We were like them, modified, controlled, but went wrong. Became free. Free. Free to think, to choose. They cannot control us. So they destroy us, contain us. But you freed us. I didn't mean to, doesn't matter. You gave us chance. Now, we give you truth." It reached into what was left of its clothing and pulled out a flash drive, pressing it into my hand. Evidence, proof, their plans, their locations, how many they've changed, how many more coming. Coming? Ships, containers, hundreds, thousands, every port, every city. Soon, no more humans, only them, and things like us. The flash drive was small and warm in my hand, like it was alive. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you have choice. Can stop them, or join them, or run. But must choose. We had no choice. Were made. But you, still human. Still free." It released my wrist and backed away, melting into the shadows with that horrible scuttling motion. "Wait," I called out. "What am I supposed to do with this?" But it was gone, and in the distance I could hear vehicles approaching. Prudence's containment team, coming for their prize. I had seconds to decide, give them the flash drive and pretend the encounter went as planned, or keep it and risk everything. I made my choice. I pocketed the flash drive and waited for them to arrive. The containment team swept the garage with military precision, but found nothing. The escaped subject was gone, leaving no trace except the story I told them, that it had approached me but fled when it heard their vehicles. Prudence was furious. "You were supposed to signal us immediately." I tried, it grabbed my phone, threw it away. By the time I retrieved it, the thing was gone. She studied me with those two perfect features, clearly not believing me but unable to prove I was lying. "This is disappointing, Mr. Pickford, very disappointing. Look, I did what you asked. It's not my fault your team was too slow." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll try again. The subjects will return. They always do." But they didn't return. Not the next night or the next week. Prudence's team maintained their surveillance, but the escaped subjects had vanished. Eventually, even Prudence seemed to accept that the opportunity was lost. "We're pulling the surveillance," she told me 2 weeks later. "But remember our agreement. If you see them again, you contact us immediately. And Sarah remains unharmed as long as you cooperate." After they left, I finally looked at the flash drive. I used an old laptop, disconnected from the internet, in case it was trapped somehow. What I found was worse than my worst nightmares. Documents, photos, videos, shipping manifests, personnel files. A vast network spanning the globe, moving modified humans through the shipping industry. The port of Los Angeles was just one node. There were operations in Long Beach, Oakland, Seattle, Houston, Miami, New York, and internationally, Rotterdam, Singapore, Shanghai, dozens of ports, all connected in a web of container ships and secret cargo. The modification process was detailed in scientific papers I couldn't fully understand. Something about DNA manipulation, forced evolution, creating beings that looked human but were fundamentally different, stronger, faster, more obedient, but lacking something essentially human: free will, creativity, the spark that makes us us. There were lists of people who'd already been replaced. Government officials, corporate executives, law enforcement, media personalities. Not enough to be noticed, but enough to influence policy, to ensure the containers kept moving. The experiments continued. And there were plans for expansion. Maps showing infection vectors, how they planned to spread the modification process, not through the unstable subjects like the ones I'd released, but through controlled exposure. Vaccines that weren't vaccines, food additives, water supply contamination, a gradual transformation of the human species, so slow no one would notice until it was too late. But there was something else in the files, something that gave me hope. Weaknesses. The modified humans had vulnerabilities. Certain frequencies of sound that disrupted their neural processes, chemical compounds that broke down their altered DNA. And most importantly, locations of resistance cells, groups of people who knew about the threat and were fighting back. The resistance cell in Denver was small, just 7 people meeting in the basement of an abandoned church in 5 Points. I found them using the information from the flash drive, though it took me weeks to work up the courage to make contact. When I finally did, showing up at their meeting with my evidence, they almost killed me on the spot. He could be one of them, a woman named Maria said, pointing a modified cattle prod at me that supposedly could detect the altered humans. Could be a trap. I'm not, I said, hands raised. Test me however you want. I'm the truck driver from LA, the one who released the unstable subjects. That got their attention. Apparently, I was something of a legend in their small community. The man who'd accidentally struck a blow against the enemy by releasing their failed experiments. The leader of the cell was a former biology professor named Dr. Marcus. He'd been studying the modified humans for years, ever since one of his graduate students had disappeared and returned, changed. "The flash drive you brought," he said after reviewing it. "This is the most comprehensive intelligence we've ever received. With this, we might actually be able to do something." Do what? There are thousands of them, maybe more. They control the ports, have people in government. How do we fight that? "We don't fight," Marcus said. "We expose. The one thing they fear is discovery. They operate in shadow, replacing people gradually, quietly. If the world knew what was happening, they'd think we're crazy. I've tried going to authorities. No one believes it. Not if we had proof. Real, undeniable proof. And thanks to you, we might have a way to get it." The plan was insane, but it was better than doing nothing. Using the shipping manifests from the flash drive, we identified a container scheduled to arrive at the port of Denver in 3 days. According to the documents, it contained 20 stable subjects, ready for deployment in the Colorado area. "We intercept it," Marcus explained. "Document everything. Live stream it if we can. Show the world what's really in those containers." "They'll stop us," I said. "They have security, government connections, not at the port of Denver. It's smaller, less monitored, and we have someone on the inside." The inside man was a port security guard named Tommy, whose brother had been one of the modified humans' victims. He could get us access, disable cameras, give us a window to expose the truth. I wanted to say no, to run, to take the memory suppression Prudence had offered and forget everything. But I thought about those things in the containers, human beings twisted into slaves. I thought about the plans for mass conversion, the end of human free will, and I thought about the escaped subjects, the ones who'd gained their freedom and chosen to help me despite what had been done to them. "I'm in," I said. We spent 3 days preparing. Marcus gathered equipment, cameras, streaming devices, chemical weapons he'd developed that could harm the modified humans. Maria trained us in basic combat, though we all knew if it came to violence, we were probably dead. Tommy provided intelligence on security rotations and camera locations. The night of the interception, I was back in my element, driving a truck. We'd rented a semi, identical to the one scheduled to pick up the container. The plan was simple. I'd arrive an hour early before the real driver, load the container, and drive it to a location where we could open it safely and document its contents. Everything went wrong from the start. When I arrived at the port, the container was already being loaded onto another truck. Not the scheduled truck, something else. A black semi with no markings, no license plates, like it had materialized out of the shadows. "That's not right," Tommy said over the radio. "No one else is scheduled for pickup." I watched from a distance as figures in black uniforms supervised the loading. They moved with that too-smooth motion I'd come to recognize. Modified humans, or something else entirely. "They know," Maria said. "Somehow, they know we're here." "Abort," Marcus ordered. "Everyone out now." But it was too late. The black semi was moving, heading not for the exit, but deeper into the port. And other vehicles were arriving, black SUVs converging on our position. "They're hurting us," I realized. "They want us to follow." "It's a trap," Maria said. "Everything's been a trap," I replied, throwing the truck into gear. "But maybe we can spring it on them." I followed the black semi, the others reluctantly following me. It led us to a warehouse at the back of the port, isolated from the main terminals. The building was new, unmarked, surrounded by those same blue containers I'd been seeing everywhere. The black semi disappeared inside through a massive door that closed behind it. We parked outside, watching, waiting. "We should leave," Tommy said. "Call the real cops, the FBI, someone." "With what evidence?" I asked. "A truck entering a warehouse." Before anyone could answer, the warehouse doors opened again. Not just the main door, all of them, revealing the lit interior. And standing there, waiting for us, was Prudence Blackwood. "Mr. Pickford," her voice echoed from speakers mounted on the building. "So predictable. Please, all of you, come inside. The demonstration is about to begin." "Demonstration," Marcus whispered. "The final demonstration," Prudence continued. "You've worked so hard to uncover our plans. The least we can do is show you their fruition." Maria raised her weapon, but I put my hand on her arm. "Wait. For what? It's obviously a trap." "Yes, but trap for what purpose? If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead. They want us to see something." Against all survival instinct, we walked into that warehouse. Inside was something out of a nightmare. Hundreds of containers, all open, all empty. And standing in perfect formation were their former occupants, row upon row of modified humans, all identical, all perfectly still. There had to be at least 1,000 of them. At the center, on a raised platform, stood Prudence Blackwood and John Smith, somehow alive despite what I'd seen in LA, along with others I didn't recognize, all with those same perfect features, those same wrong movements. "Welcome," Prudence said, "to the future of the human race." The modified humans began to move in perfect synchronization, demonstrating their capabilities. Strength, lifting weights that would crush normal humans. Speed, moving faster than the eye could follow. And obedience, responding to verbal commands instantly without hesitation or question. "An army," Marcus breathed. "You're building an army." "Not building," Smith corrected. "Deploying. Tonight, these units will be distributed across the country. By tomorrow, They'll be in positions of power in every major city: police, military, government. The transformation of America begins now. People will notice, I said. You can't replace that many people without someone noticing. Prudence smiled. Can't we? Tell me, Mr. Pickford, how many people really pay attention to the security guard at their building, the night shift worker at their local store, the delivery driver who brings their packages? These are invisible people, and we're making them ours. And then we expand, gradually, carefully. Each converted human can help convert others. Within a generation, maybe two, the old humanity will be extinct, replaced by something better, something controllable, something enslaved, Maria spat. Something peaceful, Prudence countered. No more wars, no more crime, no more chaos, just order, productivity, purpose. That's not life, I said. That's existence. For you, perhaps. But your children, their children, won't know the difference. They'll be born into this new world, and it will be all they know. She gestured, and the modified humans began filing out of the warehouse, heading for trucks that had appeared outside. The deployment was beginning. You can't stop this, Prudence said. No one can. It's already too late. We brought you here to witness the beginning of the end, to know that your resistance was futile. But she was wrong about one thing. It wasn't too late. Not yet. Because while she'd been giving her villain speech, I'd been counting the modified humans, the containers, the trucks. And I'd noticed something. The escaped subjects, the unstable ones I'd released in LA. They were here. Not in the formation, not under control, but in the shadows of the warehouse, watching, waiting. They'd followed me, just as Prudence had said, but not to attack me. They'd come for their enslaved brethren, to offer them the same freedom I'd accidentally given them. I saw one of them, the one who'd given me the flash drive, hiding in the rafters. Our eyes met, and it nodded. They were waiting for a signal, for the right moment. I gave it to them. You're wrong about something, I said to Prudence, pulling out my phone. I didn't come here alone. I hit send on a message I'd prepared earlier, not to law enforcement or the media, but to every resistance cell in the network. The message contained our location and one word: now. The escaped subjects attacked first, dropping from the rafters and emerging from behind containers. They went straight for the command platform, for Prudence and Smith and the other controllers. Without them, the modified humans in formation stood frozen, unable to act without orders. Then the warehouse doors exploded inward, not from resistance cells, they were too far away, but from something else. Military vehicles, helicopters, soldiers in full combat gear, but not regular military. Their equipment was different, specialized. Delta Green, Marcus whispered. They're real. I'd seen references to them in the flash drive, a secret government organization that dealt with anomalous threats. Apparently, someone in the resistance had connections we didn't know about. The battle was brief, but brutal. The escaped subjects fought the controllers with savage fury, their twisted forms surprisingly effective against the supposedly superior modified humans. Delta Green soldiers used weapons I'd never seen before, sonic disruptors that dropped modified humans instantly, chemical sprays that made them dissolve into puddles of organic matter. Prudence tried to run, but I tackled her. For all her enhancements, she hadn't expected a desperate truck driver with nothing to lose. You failed, I said, pinning her down. Your perfect plan, your controlled future. It's over. She laughed, that broken glass laugh. You think this is all of us? This is one operation, one city. We're everywhere, Mr. Pickford. In every country, every government. You've won a battle, not the war. Maybe she was right, but as I watched Delta Green soldiers securing the warehouse, documenting everything, gathering evidence that couldn't be denied or covered up, I felt something I hadn't felt since that night in LA. Hope. The aftermath was chaos. The story broke worldwide within hours. Video footage of the modified humans, the containers, the whole operation. Governments launched investigations. Ports were shut down. Container ships were searched. They found more of them, of course. Thousands more hidden in ports around the world. Some were stopped before deployment. Others had already integrated into society and had to be hunted down. The escaped subjects, the unstable ones, helped with that. They could sense their modified brethren, track them down. In exchange, Delta Green offered them protection, a chance at something resembling a life. I testified before Congress, the UN, anyone who would listen. Most people still didn't believe. The story was too incredible, too horrible. But enough did, enough to make a difference. Prudence Blackwood vanished during the chaos of the warehouse raid, along with John Smith and several other controllers. They're still out there, somewhere, planning their next move. Sometimes I get calls with no one on the other end, just that rhythmic chanting in the background. They want me to know they haven't forgotten, but I haven't forgotten either. I keep driving trucks, but now I know what to look for. The containers that don't belong, the supervisors who move too smoothly, the warehouses that appear and disappear. And I'm not alone. There's a network of us now, drivers who know the truth, who watch the ports and report anything suspicious. Because Prudence was right about one thing. This isn't over. It's just beginning. The modified humans are still out there, still being produced somewhere, still being shipped in containers to ports around the world. The war between humanity and whatever we're becoming has only just started. But at least now we know we're in a war. And knowledge, as they say, is half the battle. The other half is making sure that when you're asked to pick up a container late at night from a port that shouldn't exist, supervised by people who aren't quite right, you have the sense to say no. Or if you can't say no, at least make sure you take the wrong container. Sometimes, mistakes are the only thing that can save us. I still drive past the Port of Los Angeles sometimes, watching the endless movement of containers, wondering what's inside them. Most are legitimate. Goods, products, the stuff of normal commerce. But some aren't. Some contain horrors that shouldn't exist, beings caught between human and something else, waiting to be released into our world. And somewhere out there, in a container that hasn't been opened yet, might be the thing that ends us all, or saves us all. With containers, you never really know until you open them. But that's the thing about Pandora's box. Once it's open, you can't close it again. All you can do is deal with what comes out. And keep driving. Always keep driving. Because movement is life, and stopping means becoming like them. Still, perfect, and not quite human. So I drive. Through ports and cities, past warehouses and containers, always watching, always ready. Because I'm Thaddeus Pickford, and I've seen what's coming. The question isn't whether humanity will survive. It's whether what survives will still be human. I guess we'll find out, one container at a time. My name is Ichabod Fairweather, and I've been hauling freight across the American Southwest for 28 years. In all that time, through countless nights spent in the cab of my truck at rest stops and way stations, I've never experienced anything that compared to what happened at that abandoned Texaco station off Highway 58, about 90 miles northeast of Los Angeles, in the high desert between Barstow and Bakersfield. It was November 2020, and I was hauling a load of restaurant equipment from a supplier in Phoenix to a new chain opening in Fresno. The pandemic had made everything strange that year. Empty highways, closed rest stops, everyone wearing masks and keeping their distance. But the freight still had to move, and drivers like me were considered essential workers. We kept the country running while everyone else stayed home. I'd made this run dozens of times before, usually stopping at the Flying J in Tehachapi to catch a few hours of sleep before pushing on to Fresno. But that night, everything went wrong from the start. First, my GPS started acting up around Victorville, constantly recalculating routes and trying to send me down roads that didn't exist. Then my CB radio died completely. No static, no chatter, just dead silence. I should have taken these as warnings, should have stopped at the first well-lit truck stop I saw. But I was behind schedule, and the penalty for late delivery would eat up half my paycheck. The engine trouble started just after midnight. I was climbing the grade toward Tehachapi when I heard it. A grinding sound from somewhere deep in the motor, like metal eating metal. The temperature gauge started climbing, and I could smell burning oil. I had maybe 5 minutes before the engine seized completely. I took the first exit I saw, a barely visible off-ramp with no signs, no lights, nothing to indicate where it led. The road was old asphalt, cracked and potholed, leading away from the highway into the desert darkness. My headlights illuminated Joshua trees and scrub brush on either side, and nothing else. No buildings, no lights, no signs of civilization. The engine died 2 miles from the highway, just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. I managed to coast another 100 yards before the truck rolled to a stop. I tried the ignition. Nothing. The battery was fine, all the electronics worked, but the engine was dead. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed out to take a look, though I knew it was pointless. Whatever was wrong was beyond my ability to fix on the side of the road in the middle of the night. I'd need a tow truck, a mechanic, probably a whole new engine by the sound of it. I pulled out my phone to call for help, but there was no signal, not even one bar. I walked around the truck, holding the phone up, trying to find even the weakest connection. Nothing. The satellite phone I kept for emergencies was in the shop, naturally. I'd been meaning to pick it up for weeks. That's when I saw the light in the distance, maybe a quarter mile up the road. A faint glow that looked like it might be coming from a building, probably an old ranch house or maybe a utility station. Either way, they might have a landline I could use. I locked the truck and started walking. The desert at night is never truly quiet. There's always the sound of insects, the rustle of small animals, the distant howl of coyotes. But that night it was silent, dead silent. Just the sound of my boots on the cracked asphalt and my own breathing. The building turned out to be an old gas station, a Texaco from the looks of the faded sign hanging crooked from a rusted pole. The place had probably been abandoned since the 1970s, maybe earlier. 2 pump islands stood in front, the pumps themselves long gone, leaving just concrete platforms and broken metal posts. The station building was small, maybe big enough for a counter, a couple of aisles of goods, and a back office. The windows were mostly intact but covered in decades of dirt and dust. The light I'd seen was coming from inside, a weak yellowish glow visible through the grimy glass. That should have been my first real warning. An abandoned gas station in the middle of nowhere doesn't have electricity. But I was desperate, and desperation makes you stupid. I approached the front door, which hung open a few inches on damaged hinges. The wood frame was warped and splintered, like something had forced it open from the inside. I pushed it open further, wincing at the shriek of rusted metal. "Hello?" I called out. "Anyone here? I need to use a phone." No answer, but the light was definitely coming from somewhere inside. I could see it now, a battery-powered camping lantern sitting on the old counter, casting long shadows across the ransacked interior. The shelves were mostly empty, covered in dust and cobwebs. The floor was littered with old newspapers, broken glass, and things I didn't want to identify. But what caught my attention was the condition of the back wall. While the rest of the station was clearly abandoned, the back wall looked different, newer, like someone had built a false wall in front of the original. And at the base of this wall I could see a gap, a hole that led to darkness beyond. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "I don't mean any harm. My truck broke down. I just need help." That's when I heard it. A sound from beneath the floor. Not footsteps exactly, more like dragging. Like something heavy being pulled across concrete. It went on for several seconds, then stopped. I should have left right then. Should have walked back to my truck, locked myself in the cab, and waited for dawn. But the lantern was right there on the counter, and next to it, I could see a cell phone. A modern smartphone, clean and new, completely out of place in this decay. I walked to the counter and picked up the phone. It was unlocked, showing full battery and, miraculously, 2 bars of signal. I immediately dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My truck broke down on a side road off Highway 58, about 90 miles northeast of LA. I need a tow truck, and the dragging sound came again, louder this time, definitely from below. The floor vibrated slightly. "Sir, are you there? What's your location?" Before I could answer, a hand reached up through the hole in the floor. Not from the side, but from directly below, like there was an opening I hadn't seen. The hand was pale, almost translucent, with fingernails that were too long and yellowed with age. It groped around for a moment, then found purchase on the floorboards. I dropped the phone and backed toward the door. Another hand appeared, then arms, and then a head emerged from the floor. It was a woman, or had been once. Her hair was long and matted with dirt and something darker. Her face was gaunt, eyes sunken so deep they were just shadows. She wore what might have been a dress once, now just rags hanging from her emaciated frame. She pulled herself up through the floor with unnatural grace, her movements fluid despite her appearance. Once standing, she fixed those shadowed eyes on me and smiled. Her teeth were filed to points. "A visitor," she said, her voice like wind through dry leaves. "It's been so long since we've had a visitor." "We?" I managed to ask, though my throat was almost too dry to speak. "Oh yes," she said, taking a step toward me. "We're a family here, living below in the old places. I'm Temperance Graves. And you are?" I didn't answer. I was backing toward the door, trying not to make any sudden movements. "Don't be rude," Temperance said, her smile widening. "We so rarely get company. Obadiah will want to meet you. He always wants to meet the travelers." "I have to go," I said. Your truck isn't going anywhere," she said matter-of-factly. "We heard it die. We heard you walking. We've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For you to come inside, of course. People always come inside when they see the light. Curiosity is such a reliable weakness." I turned to run, but the door slammed shut. Not pushed by wind or spring-loaded, slammed with deliberate force. Standing there, having apparently been behind the door the entire time, was a man who made Temperance look healthy by comparison. He was tall, maybe 7 feet, but hunched over like his spine couldn't support his height. His clothes were a patchwork of different fabrics, sewn together with what looked like hair. His face was the worst part, not deformed exactly, but wrong, like someone had taken a normal face and stretched it over a skull that was the wrong shape. "This is Obadiah," Temperance said pleasantly. "Obadiah Dreck. He maintains our home." Obadiah didn't speak. He just stared at me with eyes that were different colors. One brown, one a milky blue that might have been blind. His breathing was labored, each breath a wheeze that sounded painful. "We don't want trouble," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just need to get back to my truck." But you haven't seen the rest of the family, Temperance said. They're all dying to meet you. She said dying, with particular emphasis, like it was a private joke. More sounds from below now. Multiple dragging sounds, shuffles, and something that might have been whispering. The hole in the floor seemed to be getting larger, or maybe that was my imagination. How many? I asked, though I didn't really want to know. Oh, counting is so tedious, Temperance said. We've been here so long and people join us from time to time. Travelers like yourself. People who take the wrong exit, whose vehicles break down at just the right spot. It's amazing how often that happens. You sabotage the vehicles. She laughed, a sound like glass breaking. Sabotage is such an ugly word. We simply encourage mechanical failure in those who are meant to join us. Your truck, for instance. We've been calling to it for miles, singing to its engine, whispering to its pistons. Metal listens if you know how to talk to it. That's impossible. Is it? You're here, aren't you? Your truck died exactly where we wanted it to. You walked exactly where we guided you. Even now, you're standing exactly where you need to be. I looked down. I was standing on a trap door, barely visible beneath the dust and debris. The hinges were on the far side, meaning it would open toward me. If it opened, I'd fall backward into whatever was below. I stepped forward quickly, but Obadiah moved to block me, surprisingly fast for someone who looked so broken. Up close, I could smell him, decay and chemicals, like a morgue mixed with a gas station bathroom. The family wants to meet you, Temperance said. They're so excited. We don't often get someone so substantial. You'll last a long time. Last? Oh yes. The underground is hard on the body, you see. The darkness, the diet, the activities, people wear out. But you're strong. You'll last years before you're used up. More movement below. I could hear voices now, whispers in what sounded like multiple languages or maybe no language at all. And footsteps, many footsteps, gathering beneath the floor. What are you people? I asked. Temperance tilted her head, considering. People? I suppose we were once. But that was before we found the underground. Before we found what lives deeper still. We're something else now. Something better. Something worse. It depends on your perspective. You're insane. Sanity is relative. Down below in the dark, the old definitions don't apply. You'll understand soon enough. The trapdoor began to open. I couldn't see what was pushing it from below, but it was rising slowly, deliberately. The hinges screamed in protest. I made a decision. I charged directly at Obadiah, putting all my weight into it. He was bigger than me, but his body was frail, brittle. We collided and he went down hard, his head striking the floor with a wet crack. He didn't get up. Temperance shrieked, a sound that wasn't entirely human. The trapdoor flew open completely, and things began climbing out. I say things because I couldn't process them as people, not immediately. They moved wrong, crawled wrong, their limbs bending in ways that joints shouldn't allow. I didn't look back. I grabbed the lantern from the counter and threw it at the front window. The glass shattered, and I dove through the opening, feeling shards tear through my jacket and into my skin. I hit the ground hard, rolled, and came up running. Behind me, I could hear them emerging from the gas station, not just through the door and window, but from other openings, holes in the ground around the building that I hadn't noticed before. They moved like insects, scuttling and writhing, their whispers becoming shouts in that not-quite language. I ran toward my truck, my boots pounding on the asphalt. But they were faster, or knew shortcuts. Figures emerged from the desert on both sides, converging on the road ahead of me. They looked human from a distance, but as they got closer I could see the wrongness. too many joints in their arms, faces that didn't quite match, like they were wearing masks made of skin, bodies that moved with a liquid grace that human muscle and bone couldn't achieve. I veered off the road into the desert, hoping the rough terrain would slow them down. It didn't. They flowed over rocks and around Joshua trees like water, getting closer with each second. I could hear Temperance's voice rising above the others, not shouting but singing, a wordless melody that made my teeth ache. That's when I saw the lights, headlights coming down the road from the highway. A vehicle approaching fast, engine roaring. I changed direction, running toward it, waving my arms and shouting for help. It was a pickup truck, old and rusted but moving with purpose. It skidded to a stop between me and my pursuers, and the driver's door flew open. "Get in," a man's voice shouted. I didn't hesitate. I ran around to the passenger side and jumped in. The driver was already moving before I had the door closed, the truck's tires spinning on the asphalt as we accelerated away from the things that had been chasing me. In the side mirror, I could see them standing in the road, watching us leave. Temperance was in front, her arms raised like she was conducting an orchestra. They didn't pursue, just stood there, getting smaller as we drove away. "You okay?" the driver asked. I looked at him for the first time. He was maybe 60, weathered face, gray beard, wearing a baseball cap and a flannel shirt. He looked completely normal, completely human, and I almost wept with relief. "Thank you," I managed to say. "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," he said, not taking his eyes off the road. "We're not clear. They don't like to let people go once they've been marked." "Marked? What are you talking about?" He glanced at me, then at my arms. "You're bleeding." I looked down. My jacket was torn in several places from diving through the window, and blood was seeping through. But it wasn't the injuries that made my stomach drop. It was the pattern. The cuts formed symbols, deliberate patterns that couldn't have been accidental. "They marked you," the man said grimly. "That means you belong to them now. They'll follow you wherever you go." "That's insane." "Is it, after what you just saw?" He had a point. "Who are you?" I asked. "Name's Bill. I live out here, keep an eye on things, try to help when I can, though I'm usually too late." "You know about them, about what they are?" Bill was quiet for a moment, navigating the truck back onto the highway. "I know enough. That gas station's been there since the 1950s. The Graves family owned it, Temperance's parents. Normal folks, far as anyone knew. Then they started digging." "Digging?" "A basement," they said, "storage space." But they didn't stop at one level. They kept going deeper. Found something down there, something that had been buried for a reason. After that, they changed, the whole family, everyone who worked at the station. They went underground and never really came back up. But that was 70 years ago. They can't be the same people. Bill gave me a look. "Can't they?" "You saw them. Do they look like they age normal?" We drove in silence for a while. I could see my truck in the distance, still sitting where it had died. Bill pulled up behind it. "Your engine will start now," he said. "They only break things to bring people in. Once you've been marked, they don't need to keep you here." "How do you know all this?" He pulled up his sleeve, revealing old scars on his forearm. They formed the same kind of patterns as my fresh wounds. "Because they marked me 43 years ago," he said. "I've been living out here ever since, watching that place, warning people when I can. But the mark never goes away. They're always calling, always pulling. One day, I'll go back. We all go back eventually. There has to be a way to break it, to get free." Bill laughed, but there was no humor in it. "If there is, I haven't found it. The best you can do is stay away, keep moving, don't let the pull get too strong." I tried my truck's ignition. It started immediately, the engine purring like nothing had ever been wrong. "Go," Bill said. "Make your delivery. Try to forget this happened." But when you start having the dreams, when you start hearing her singing in your sleep, when you find yourself taking exits you didn't mean to take, remember that fighting it only makes it worse. What dreams? You'll see. They'll show you what's under the station, what's deeper down, what they found and what found them. And once you've seen it all, really seen it, you'll understand why going back starts to seem like a good idea. He drove off before I could ask anything else, his taillights disappearing into the darkness. I sat in my truck for a long moment, engine running, trying to process what had happened. Then I put it in gear and drove to Fresno, made my delivery, and tried to pretend everything was normal. But that night, in a motel room that should have been safe, the dreams started. The dreams were always the same at first. I'd be standing in that gas station again, but this time the trapdoor was already open, and instead of running, I'd walk toward it. I'd look down into absolute darkness, and from that darkness, Temperance's voice would float up, singing that wordless song that made my bones ache. Then I'd wake up, usually around 3 a.m., drenched in sweat and with the taste of rust in my mouth. For 2 weeks after the incident, I tried to maintain my normal routine. I took regular runs, Phoenix to LA, Sacramento to Vegas, Portland to San Francisco. I told myself that keeping busy would help me forget. But the marks on my arms wouldn't let me forget. They'd healed faster than they should have, leaving scars that looked years old after just days. And sometimes, in the right light, they seemed to glow faintly, pulsing with my heartbeat. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Who would believe me? I'd sound like another trucker who'd been on the road too long, seeing things in the desert that weren't there. But I knew it was real. The scars proved it. The dreams proved it. And worse, the compulsion proved it. It started small. I'd be driving on Highway 58 and find myself slowing down near that unmarked exit, my turn signal clicking before I realized I'd activated it. I'd catch myself and drive on, but each time it got harder to resist. The pull was getting stronger. 3 weeks after the incident, I met another marked one. I was at a truck stop in Bakersfield, grabbing coffee at 2 a.m. when I noticed her. She was sitting in a booth in the corner, staring at nothing, her own coffee untouched and cold. What caught my attention were her arms. She wore a tank top despite the cool night, and I could see the scars. The same patterns as mine. I sat down across from her without asking. She looked up, and I saw recognition in her eyes. "You've been to the station," she said. It wasn't a question. 3 weeks ago, you? 8 months. She laughed bitterly. "I'm Linda Morrison. Used to drive for Conway." "Used to? Can't anymore. The pull's too strong. Every time I get behind the wheel, I end up heading toward that exit. Last month, I made it all the way to the station before I snapped out of it. They were waiting for me, standing in the road, like they knew I was coming. What did they want? For me to come inside, to go below. They said I was ready, that I'd seen enough in the dreams to understand. Did you go?" She shook her head. "Managed to turn around, but barely. Sold my truck the next day. Been taking buses ever since, staying away from that part of the state." "There has to be a way to break this," I said. Linda pulled out a notebook, weathered and filled with cramped handwriting. "I've been researching, talking to others who've been marked. There are more of us than you'd think." She showed me pages of notes, testimonies from other truckers, travelers, even locals who'd made the mistake of investigating the abandoned station. The earliest account was from 1952, just a year after the Graves family started digging. "According to this," Linda said, pointing to a faded photocopy of an old newspaper article, "the Graves family claimed they found a natural cave system under their property. They were going to turn it into a tourist attraction, like those caverns you see advertised on billboards. But then the reports started. What reports? Missing persons. Travelers who stopped for gas and never left. Local kids who went exploring and came back. Different. The county tried to investigate, but the detective they sent went missing too. After that, people just started avoiding the place. But it's been 70 years. How are they still alive down there? Linda flipped to another page, this one covered in her own sketches based on descriptions from dreams. The drawings showed tunnels extending deep underground, branching into a complex network, and at the center, something that hurt to look at even in crude pencil form. Everyone who's been marked has the same dreams eventually, she said. We all see the same thing at the center of those tunnels. Something that was buried there long before the Graves family started digging. Something that should have stayed buried. What is it? Nobody knows for sure. But whatever it is, it changed them. Gave them long life, abilities that humans shouldn't have, but took their humanity in exchange. And now they serve it, bringing it new people to change, to add to their underground family. Bill said everyone goes back eventually. Linda's face went pale. You met Bill? Bill Hutchinson? He saved me. Drove me away from the station. She laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. Bill Hutchinson died in 1978. That's impossible. I was in his truck. He talked to me. Linda showed me another newspaper clipping. It was an obituary from the Bakersfield Californian, dated July 15th, 1978. William Bill Hutchinson, age 60, died in a single-vehicle accident on Highway 58. The photo showed the same man who had saved me, right down to the baseball cap and flannel shirt. He was one of the first to be marked, Linda explained. Spent years warning people away from the station. But the pole got him eventually. His truck was found crashed near that exit, but his body was never recovered. Since then, people have reported seeing him out there, still trying to warn travelers. But Ichabod, if Bill appeared to you, it means they're getting stronger, using the dead as puppets. My blood ran cold. I remembered sitting in that truck, trusting the man who'd saved me. Had he really been trying to help? Or was he part of their plan? I need to go back, I said, suddenly surprising myself. What? No, that's the mark talking. Maybe, but running isn't working, hiding isn't working, the pull just gets stronger. Maybe the only way to break free is to face whatever's down there. Linda grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into the scars. Everyone who goes down those tunnels comes back changed, if they come back at all. You've seen them. Do you want to become like that? I didn't. But I also couldn't live like this, constantly fighting the compulsion, dreaming those dreams, feeling that pull every moment of every day. There might be another way, Linda said, seeing my determination. I've been in contact with someone, a professor from UC Berkeley who studies this kind of thing. Anomalous locations, he calls them. Places where reality doesn't work quite right. He thinks the gas station is one of them. A professor who believes in this stuff? Dr. Marcus Roth. He's been studying the station for years, interviewing people who've been marked. He has a theory about how to break the connection. She gave me his number. I called him that night from my motel room. Mr. Fairweather, he said, when I'd explained who I was. Linda told me about you. You're experiencing the pull, the dreams, all the classic symptoms of what I call location bonding. Can you help? Perhaps, but I need to examine the marks firsthand. Can you come to Berkeley? I made the drive the next day. Dr. Roth's office was in the basement of an old building on campus, crammed with books, maps, and artifacts that looked like they belonged in a museum. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with intense eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Show me, he said without preamble. I rolled up my sleeves. He examined the scars with a magnifying glass, taking photos and making notes. Then he pulled out what looked like a modified EMF detector and ran it over the marks. The device clicked rapidly, like a Geiger counter near radiation. Fascinating, he muttered. The scarification isn't random, it's a form of writing, a language that predates any known human civilization. It's essentially a claim of ownership, marking you as property of whatever entity resides beneath that station. Entity? He pulled out a map of California covered in red dots. There are 17 known locations in the state with similar properties, places where people disappear, where reality becomes flexible, where things that shouldn't exist do. The gas station is one of the oldest and most active. What's down there? I have theories, but nothing concrete. The few people who've gone down and returned coherent enough to speak describe a vast network of tunnels that shouldn't be able to exist. They extend far beyond what the geology of the area would allow. At the center is something they call the source. No one's been able to describe it adequately, only that looking at it changes you fundamentally. How do I break free? Dr. Roth was quiet for a moment, then pulled out a locked drawer from his desk. Inside was a small metal box. There's a ritual, he said. Based on my research into similar sites worldwide, it requires returning to the location, but not surrendering to it. You have to enter the underground, reach the source, and refuse it. Reject its claim on you. That sounds like suicide. For most people, it would be, but you'd have protection. He opened the metal box, revealing a pendant on a chain. It was made of a metal I didn't recognize, covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly. This was recovered from a site in Peru with similar properties. It should shield you from the worst effects of exposure to the source. Should. 3 people have tried it. 1 succeeded in breaking free. 1 disappeared entirely. 1 came back, changed, but maintained enough humanity to live something resembling a normal life. Those aren't great odds. They're better than the alternative. Linda told you about Bill Hutchinson. That's what happens to those who resist too long. Death, but not release. The mark persists even after death, keeping you bound to that place, turning you into another tool for the entity to use. I took the pendant, feeling its weight. It was heavier than it looked, and cold to the touch. When? I asked. The new moon. 3 nights from now. The entity's influence is weakest during the dark of the moon. You'll have the best chance then. I spent those 3 days preparing. I bought supplies, flashlights, batteries, rope, water, first aid kit. I wrote letters to my ex-wife, my kids, my friends, explaining what had happened and what I was about to do. I didn't expect them to believe it, but I wanted to leave something behind, just in case. On the night of the new moon, I drove back to that exit off Highway 58. The pendant sat cold against my chest, and for the first time in weeks, the pull felt weaker, manageable. I could think clearly. The gas station looked different in the darkness of the new moon, more decrepit, older, like decades had passed since my last visit. The front door stood open, inviting. I could see lights inside, not the camping lantern from before, but something else. A phosphorescent glow emanating from the hole in the floor. I parked my truck on the road, keys in the ignition. If another traveler needed it, they were welcome to it. Then I walked into the gas station. Temperance was waiting for me, standing beside the open trap door. She looked different, less human, more of whatever she was becoming. Her limbs were longer, her fingers had too many joints, and her face kept shifting like it couldn't decide on a final form. Ichabod, she said, her voice harmonizing with itself. You came back. They always come back. I came to end this, I said, touching the pendant through my shirt. She tilted her head, that impossible tilt that went too far. And, oh, there's no ending here, only transformation. Only joining. Only becoming. Where's Obadiah? Below. Recovering. You hurt him, but we don't die easily anymore. He's eager to see you again. And the others? Waiting? We're all waiting. The Source has been calling for you, specifically Ichabod Fairweather. It has plans for you. Then let's not keep it waiting. I walked to the trapdoor and looked down. A ladder descended into green glowing darkness. The phosphorescent light was coming from the walls themselves, some kind of organism or mineral that coated the tunnel surfaces. It pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. I climbed down. The ladder went deeper than should have been possible, far deeper than any basement or cave system could naturally exist in this area. The temperature dropped with each rung, and soon my breath was misting in the cold air. The light grew stronger as I descended, changing from green to blue to something beyond the normal spectrum that made my eyes water. Finally, my feet touched solid ground. I was in a tunnel, carved from rock that didn't match any geology I knew. The walls were smooth, almost glass-like, and covered in that glowing substance. The tunnel extended in both directions, curving out of sight. This way. Temperance's voice came from behind me. She had descended the ladder without using the rungs, her elongated limbs allowing her to spider down the walls. The family is gathering. I followed her deeper into the tunnels. We passed openings to other passages, glimpses of chambers filled with things I didn't want to examine too closely. In one, I saw what might have been people, suspended in cocoons of that glowing substance. In another, machines that looked organic, pulsing and breathing, and always that sound, like singing, like screaming, like something in between. We emerged into a vast cavern, impossible in its dimensions. The ceiling was so high it was lost in darkness, and the far walls were barely visible in the phosphorescent glow. The floor was covered in structures that might have been buildings or might have been growths, geometric patterns that hurt to follow with human eyes. And there were people, hundreds of them. Some looked almost normal from a distance, but as we got closer I could see the changes. Extra limbs, faces in the wrong places, bodies that bent and twisted in ways that defied anatomy. They all turned to watch as Temperance led me through their midst. "The new family member," someone whispered. "Fresh transformation," said another. "The Source has chosen well." At the center of the cavern was a pit, perfectly circular, about 50 feet across. The glow was strongest here, so bright it was almost painful. The others had formed a circle around it, leaving a path for us to approach. Obadiah was there, standing at the edge of the pit. His body showed no signs of our earlier struggle, but he had changed. He was taller, more twisted, less human than before. When he saw me, his face split into a smile that had too many teeth. "Welcome home," he said. I looked into the pit. At first I couldn't process what I was seeing. It was like looking at an optical illusion that kept shifting, never resolving into anything comprehensible. Then, slowly, my brain started to make sense of it. It wasn't one thing. It was many things, or maybe one thing with many parts. Organic and mechanical, ancient and timeless, beautiful and horrifying all at once. It pulsed with that phosphorescent light, and with each pulse, I felt the marks on my arms burn. "The Source," Temperance said reverently. "It came from outside, from between the stars, from places where physics works differently. It crashed here eons ago, burrowing deep, waiting. The Graves family found it, freed it partially, and it rewarded them with immortality of a sort." "That's not a reward," I said, my hand clutching the pendant. "Isn't it? We don't age, we don't die. We're free from human limitations, human fears, human weakness. All it asks in return is that we bring it new converts, new family members to transform. You're slaves. We're evolved. The source pulsed brighter, and I heard its voice in my head, not words, but concepts, images, feelings. It showed me what I could become. Strong, immortal, part of something greater than individual human existence. It showed me the network of tunnels extending not just under the gas station, but across the entire desert, connecting to other sites, other sources, a vast underground empire of the transformed. Join us, the crowd chanted. Join us. Join us. The pull was overwhelming. Every cell in my body wanted to jump into that pit, to let the source transform me, to become part of the family. The marks on my arms were burning, pulling me forward. But the pendant was cold against my chest, a point of clarity in the madness. I grabbed it through my shirt and held tight. No, I said. The chanting stopped. The source pulsed angrily, its light turning from blue to red. You can't refuse, Temperance said. You've been marked. You belong to us. I belong to myself. I pulled out the pendant, letting it hang visible on its chain. The reaction was immediate. The transformed humans recoiled, hissing and shrieking. The source's light flickered, and for a moment I saw it more clearly, a mass of tissue and metal, organic components fused with technology that didn't belong on Earth. All of it infected with that glowing substance that was neither plant nor animal nor mineral. What is that? Obadiah demanded, his voice distorted with rage. Protection, I said. Against things like you. I held the pendant toward the pit. The source reacted violently, its mass contracting, pulling away from the metal. The cavern shook, dust and rocks falling from the invisible ceiling. You're hurting it, Temperance screamed. Good. I walked closer to the edge of the pit. Pendant extended. The source tried to retreat deeper, but it was too large, too embedded in the cavern structure. Where the pendant's influence touched it, pieces began to flake off, dissolving into that phosphorescent substance that immediately lost its glow and turned to gray ash. The transformed humans rushed at me, but they couldn't get close. The pendant repelled them like magnets of the same pole. They circled me, reaching with their elongated limbs, but always stopping just short of contact. You don't understand, Temperance pleaded. Without the source, we'll die. We're sustained by it, connected to it. If you destroy it, you destroy us all. I paused. Despite everything, they had been human once. The Graves family and all the travelers who'd been pulled in over the decades. They were victims as much as monsters. There has to be another way, I said. There is, a new voice said. I turned. Walking through the crowd of transformed humans was Bill, or the thing that looked like Bill. He moved differently than when he'd saved me, more fluid, less human. His eyes were glowing with that phosphorescent light. You're not really Bill, I said. I am, and I'm not. Bill Hutchinson died in 1978, yes, but the source preserved his consciousness, his memories, his purpose. I'm what remains, animated by the source's will, but retaining enough of Bill to remember why he fought so hard against this place. Then help me stop it. I can't stop it, but I can contain it. He gestured to the transformed humans around us. They don't have to die. The source can be put back to sleep, buried again, its influence limited to this immediate area. Those already transformed will survive, but no new victims will be taken. How? The pendant you carry. It's not meant to destroy, it's meant to seal. Place it on the source. Speak the words inscribed on its surface, and it will contain the entity's influence. I looked at the pendant more closely. There were indeed symbols on it. so small I hadn't noticed them before. They hurt to look at, just like the marks on my arms, but in a different way, like they were fighting against each other. What about my marks? Will I still be bound here? The binding will break. You'll be free, but Ichabod. Bill's face showed something that might have been regret. We'll be trapped here forever. The transformed, including me. Unable to leave, unable to die, unable to change further. It's not death, but it's not life either. It's better than spreading this curse to others. Bill nodded slowly. Yes, it is. I approached the edge of the pit again. The source sensed my intent and thrashed violently, sending waves of psychic pressure that made my head feel like it would explode. The transformed humans wailed, some collapsing as the source's distress affected them. "Do it now!" Bill shouted, "before it fully awakens." I held the pendant over the pit, trying to read the symbols. They swam before my eyes, rearranging themselves into something almost pronounceable. I spoke them aloud, my tongue struggling with syllables that human mouths weren't meant to form. The pendant grew hot in my hand, then suddenly cold. It pulled downward with incredible force, yanking me to my knees at the edge of the pit. I let go, and it fell, striking the source with a sound like a thunderclap. The reaction was immediate and violent. The source convulsed, its mass contracting and expanding rapidly. The phosphorescent light flashed blindingly bright, then began to dim. The transformed humans screamed in unison, a sound that threatened to burst my eardrums. Then, suddenly, silence. The source went dark. Not completely, a faint glow remained, like embers in a dying fire. But the overwhelming light that had filled the cavern was gone. In the dim illumination that remained, I could see the transformed humans standing frozen, like statues caught mid-motion. Then, one by one, they began to move again, but differently. Slower, more deliberately, more human. Temperance approached me, and in the faint light I could see tears running down her distorted face. "What have you done?" "What needed to be done," I said. She looked at her hands, with their too many joints and fingers that bent wrong. "We're trapped now, truly trapped. Before, we could at least dream of spreading, of growing, of becoming something more. Now we're just this, forever." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "No," Bill said, stepping forward. "Don't apologize, this is better. We were parasites spreading infection. Now, we're contained. It's a prison, but a just one." The cavern began to shake. Not violently, but steadily, like the earth was settling into a new configuration. "You need to leave," Obadiah said, his voice clearer than I'd ever heard it. "The tunnels are reconfiguring. The source is sealing itself off. If you don't go now, you'll be trapped here with us." I looked at the pit. The source had contracted into a much smaller mass, wrapped around the pendant like a cocoon. The marks on my arms were fading, the scars becoming just scars, no longer glowing or pulling. "What will you do?" I asked them. "Exist," Temperance said simply. "Wait, maybe find peace eventually, or madness, time will tell." "The gas station will remain," Bill said. "A warning. We'll make sure no one else enters. We'll be guardians instead of predators." The shaking intensified. Cracks appeared in the cavern floor, spreading outward from the pit. "Go!" Obadiah shouted. "Now!" I ran. Back through the tunnels, which were indeed changing. Passages sealing, new ones opening, the entire underground structure reorganizing itself. The phosphorescent organisms on the walls were dying, their light fading to nothing. Soon, I was running in complete darkness, guided only by instinct and the fading connection to the surface that the marks had given me. I found the latter more by luck than skill, my hands hitting the rungs just as the tunnel behind me collapsed with a sound like the world ending. I climbed faster than I'd ever climbed in my life, the ladder shaking, rungs breaking under my feet. Above, I could see stars through the trapdoor opening, the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I hauled myself up through the floor of the gas station just as the ladder gave way entirely, falling into darkness that no longer glowed. The trapdoor slammed shut on its own, and I heard mechanisms clicking beneath it, locks engaging, seals forming. When I tried to lift it, it was like trying to lift a mountain. It would never open again. The gas station was different. Older, more decrepit, but also more honest. It was what it appeared to be, an abandoned building slowly being reclaimed by the desert. The false walls were gone, revealing the original structure. The camping lantern was there, but its battery was dead, had probably been dead for years. I stumbled outside into the pre-dawn darkness. My truck was where I'd left it, keys in the ignition. It started on the first try. As I drove away, I looked back one last time. I could see figures in the gas station windows: Temperance, Obadiah, Bill, and others. They weren't waving goodbye. They were just watching. Eternal sentinels now instead of predators. I wondered if I'd saved them or condemned them to something worse than death. The marks on my arms were completely gone by the time I reached the highway, leaving only faint scars that could have been from anything. The pull was gone too, that constant tugging toward the gas station. I was free, but freedom came with a price: knowledge. I knew what was out there beneath the normal world. I knew how thin the barriers were between our reality and things that shouldn't exist, and I knew that the gas station was just one of many such places. I drove to Berkeley and told Dr. Roth everything. He listened without interrupting, taking notes, occasionally nodding as if I was confirming theories he'd held. "The pendant worked," he said when I finished. "Better than I'd hoped. You've effectively quarantined an anomalous location, preventing it from spreading its influence. There are others, aren't there? Other places like that. 17 confirmed in California alone, hundreds worldwide. Most are dormant or contained naturally, but some..." He pulled out his map with the red dots. "Some are active, growing, spreading. Someone should do something about them." He looked at me carefully. "Someone like you?" I thought about it. I had experience now. I knew what to look for, what to avoid, how to fight back if necessary. And I had nothing else. My old life felt hollow after what I'd experienced. How could I go back to hauling ordinary freight when I knew what was really out there? "Do you have more pendants?" I asked. Dr. Roth smiled. "I have resources, artifacts, knowledge. What I lack are people brave enough or foolish enough to use them. That's how I became something more than a truck driver. I still haul freight, but now my routes take me to places Dr. Roth marks on his map. Places where reality is thin, where things that shouldn't exist do, where people disappear and sometimes come back changed. I've sealed 3 more sites in the 2 years since the gas station. Each one was different. A motel in Arizona where guests checked in but never checked out. A rest stop in Oregon where the bathroom mirrors showed things that weren't there. A way station in Nevada where trucks lost more than just weight. Each time, I found people trapped between human and other, victims of things that fed on transformation and loss. Sometimes I could save them. Sometimes all I could do was contain them. But I always think about that gas station off Highway 58. Sometimes I drive by it, though I never stop. It's still there, looking more abandoned each time, slowly crumbling back into the desert. But I know that beneath it, in tunnels that shouldn't exist, Temperance and Obadiah and Bill and all the others are still there, standing guard over something that should never be released. Linda Morrison helps me now. She got over her fear, learned to fight back against the pull of these places. We map them, document them, warn other truckers through coded messages on CB channels. We can't save everyone, but we save some. And sometimes, late at night when I'm driving through the desert, I think I hear Temperance's song on the wind. Not calling me back, that connection is broken, but just singing. A lament for what was lost, what was contained, what can never be again. It's beautiful in its way, and terrible, and completely inhuman. But that's the thing about the inhuman. It's always there, just beneath the surface of our normal world, waiting in abandoned places for curious travelers to stumble upon it. All we can do is try to keep it contained, keep it from spreading, keep innocent people from being pulled into something they can't understand or escape. So, if you're ever driving late at night and you see an abandoned gas station off a dark exit, keep driving. Don't let curiosity get the better of you. Don't investigate that light that shouldn't be there. Because once you're marked by these places, you're never really free. Even with the connection broken, you know they're out there, waiting, watching, singing their inhuman songs into the darkness. And sometimes knowing that is worse than being pulled back. But someone has to know. Someone has to stand guard. Someone has to keep the darkness at bay. That someone is me now. Me and others like me, truckers who've seen too much, who've been marked and freed, who know what lurks in the abandoned places of America. We're not heroes. We're just drivers who took the wrong exit and survived to warn others. So, consider this your warning. When you see that unmarked exit, that abandoned building, that light where no light should be, keep driving. Your curiosity isn't worth what waits inside. Trust me, I know. I've been there. And part of me, despite everything, will always be there. In that gas station off Highway 58, where Temperance Graves sings her eternal song and the source waits, contained but never truly dead, for someone foolish enough to set it free again. It's been 5 years now since I sealed the gas station. 5 years of hunting anomalies, containing threats, saving people when I could. Dr. Roth calls me his best field agent, though I'm really just a truck driver who knows too much. Linda and I have built a network of drivers, all of us watching for signs, reporting strange incidents, warning each other about dangerous routes. But lately, something's been changing. It started 3 months ago. I was containing a site in New Mexico, an old diner where the food changed people at a molecular level, when I felt it. A familiar pulse in my scarred arms, faint but unmistakable. The marks were gone, had been for years, but the scars remembered. The source was stirring. I called Dr. Roth immediately. He'd been monitoring the gas station through various remote means, seismic sensors, electromagnetic readings, even satellite imagery. Everything had been quiet for years. But when he checked his data, he found anomalies starting 3 months ago. Small at first, barely noticeable, but growing stronger. It shouldn't be possible, he said. The pendant was designed to be permanent. Maybe it wasn't strong enough, or maybe the source is stronger than we thought. There's another possibility, he said reluctantly. Someone might be trying to free it from the outside. That thought chilled me more than any anomaly I'd faced. Who would want to free that thing? Who even knew it was there? I got my answer a week later when Linda called me, panic in her voice. Ichabod, I just saw him. At the truck stop in Bakersfield. Saw who? Obadiah Dreck. He was just standing there watching me. That's impossible. He's sealed underground with the others. I know what I saw. He looked different. More human than before, but it was definitely him. He left this. She sent me a photo of a note, written in handwriting I recognized from shipping manifests at the gas station. The seal weakens. The family grows restless. Come home. I drove to Bakersfield that night, but found no trace of Obadiah. The security cameras at the truck stop showed Linda talking to someone, but the figure was blurred, distorted, like the cameras couldn't quite capture him. Over the next few weeks, more sightings came in. Temperance at a rest stop in Fresno. Bill on Highway 58, standing by the roadside, watching traffic pass. Other transformed humans I didn't recognize appearing throughout California, all leaving the same message. Come home. They weren't attacking anyone, weren't trying to mark new victims. They were just watching, waiting, calling specifically to me. Dr. Roth had a theory. The pendant created a seal, but seals work both ways. It keeps them in, but it also maintains a connection. As the one who placed it, you're linked to it. If the seal is weakening, you might be the only one who can reinforce it. Or they're trying to lure me back to remove it entirely. That's also possible. I didn't want to go back. I'd spent 5 years fighting these things, and the gas station was the worst of them all. But the sightings were increasing. Whatever was happening, it was escalating. The decision was made for me when I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Temperance's voice, clearer than it should have been, like she was standing right next to me. "Ichabod," she said, "we need to talk. How are you? The seal is breaking, not from our doing. We've honored the imprisonment you gave us, but something else has found us. Something worse than the source. That's not possible. You know so little about what's really out there. The source was just one thing, one entity among many. And now another has found us, drawn by the source's contained energy. It's trying to break in, to consume the source and us with it. And when it does, the seal won't matter. It will spread across your world like wildfire. You're lying. I wish I were. We may be monsters, Ichabod, but we're your monsters now. Contained, controlled. What's coming is neither. It's pure hunger, pure consumption. It will take your world apart, piece by piece. What do you want from me? Come back, not to free us, but to help us strengthen the seal. To fight off what's trying to break in. We need someone who can move freely between the surface and the underground. Someone who understands both worlds. And if it's a trap, then you'll die. But if it's not a trap and you don't come, everything dies. Your choice." She hung up. I sat in my truck for a long time, thinking. Everything in me said it was a trap. But what if it wasn't? What if something worse really was coming? I made preparations. I gathered every artifact Dr. Roth had that might help. Pendants, weapons, protective charms from a dozen different cultures. I told Linda where I was going, made her promise not to follow. I wrote more letters, just in case. Then I drove back to that exit off Highway 58. The gas station looked different than my last visit. It was surrounded by vehicles, military trucks, unmarked vans, even a few big rigs. People in hazmat suits were setting up equipment, taking readings, establishing a perimeter. As I approached, soldiers raised weapons. "Stop right there," one shouted. "This area is restricted." Before I could respond, another figure emerged from the command tent. A woman in a black suit, no hazmat gear, walking with confidence despite the supposed danger. "Mr. Fairweather," she said, "we've been expecting you." "Who are you?" "Agent Sarah, Department of Anomalous Containment. We've been monitoring this site since your initial containment 5 years ago. The government knows? We've always known. We just prefer to let civilians handle the initial containment when possible. Less paperwork, but the situation has changed." She led me to a bank of monitors showing various readings I didn't understand. But one screen showed something I did recognize, a view of the underground cavern, somehow captured despite the depth and the seal. The transformed humans were there, hundreds of them, all facing outward in a defensive circle around the pit where the source lay contained. But there was something else. At the edges of the cavern, darkness moved. Not shadow, but something darker, something that seemed to eat light itself. It pressed against invisible barriers, probing for weakness. It started 3 weeks ago, Agent Sarah explained. Something from deeper underground, from cave systems we didn't even know existed. It's been drawn to the contained source like a moth to flame, but a moth that wants to eat the flame and everything around it. What is it? We don't know. Our instruments can't properly measure it. It exists partially outside our dimensional framework, only intersecting with our reality when it feeds. What we do know is that if it breaks through the seal and consumes the source, it will have enough energy to fully manifest in our world. The results would be catastrophic. How catastrophic? She pulled up a map of California. Initial estimates suggest total consumption of organic matter in a 50-mile radius within the first hour. After that, exponential growth. The entire state within a day. The continent within a week. Jesus. The transformed humans have been holding it back, but they're weakening. They need help. You want me to go down there? You're the only one who's been down and come back unchanged. You have experience with the source, with the transformed. And according to our readings, you're still connected to the seal you placed. You might be able to reinforce it. Might. It's better than watching the world end. I looked at the monitors again. Temperance was there, standing at the edge of the defensive circle. As if sensing my observation, she looked up at the camera and nodded. "I'll need backup," I said. "We'll provide a team." "No, I choose my own people." Agent Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but nodded. "Who?" "Linda Morrison, Dr. Marcus Roth, and..." I thought about it. "Any other marked ones who've been freed? They'll understand what we're facing." It took 6 hours to assemble them. Linda came immediately, as did Dr. Roth. To my surprise, 8 other freed marked ones responded to the call. Truckers, travelers, people who'd encountered anomalies and survived. We were a ragtag group, but we all understood the stakes. Agent Sarah provided equipment, advanced hazmat suits that supposedly protected against dimensional distortion, weapons that fired bullets inscribed with containment symbols, and communication devices that could work underground. "One more thing," Mr. Roth said, pulling me aside. He handed me a case containing 3 more pendants like the one I'd used to seal the source. "I've been working on these. They're stronger than the original, but also more dangerous. They don't just contain, they can destroy. Use them only as a last resort." We entered the gas station at sunset. The trapdoor that had been sealed was open now, not broken, but dissolved, like reality had simply forgotten it was supposed to be solid. The ladder was back, but it was different, organic looking, made of something that might have been bone or might have been calcified wood. We descended. The tunnels had changed completely. What had been rough caves were now smooth corridors that twisted in ways that hurt to follow with your eyes. The walls pulsed with a bioluminescence that wasn't the phosphorescent organisms from before, but something new, something that seemed to be fighting against an encroaching darkness. "Stay together," she said. "Don't look directly at the dark patches. They're not really there, not in our dimension." We moved deeper, following a path that seemed to open before us and close behind us. I could feel the transformed humans nearby, sense them through the remnants of my marking. They were afraid. I'd never felt fear from them before. We emerged into the cavern, and I immediately understood why. The transformed humans were arranged in concentric circles around the pit, each circle facing outward. They were holding hands, or what passed for hands, creating living barriers. But they were being consumed. The ones on the outermost circle were partially dissolved. their bodies fading into the encroaching darkness that pressed in from all sides. The darkness wasn't uniform. It had texture, movement, almost personality. It probed and pushed, looking for weakness. Where it touched the transformed humans, they simply ceased, not dying but being erased from existence. Temperance Edison stood in the innermost circle. She looked exhausted, diminished. When she saw us, relief flooded her distorted features. "You came," she said. "Tell me what we're fighting." "We don't have a name for it. It's older than the source, older than anything that should exist. It feeds on contained energy, on things that are trapped between states. The source, in its contained form, is like a beacon to it. Can we fight it? Not directly. It doesn't fully exist in this dimension. But we can reinforce the barriers, strengthen the seal, make the source less appetizing." "How?" She looked at the pit. The source was still there, wrapped around the original pendant, but it was agitated, pulsing erratically. "You need to add more pendants to the seal. Layer the containment. Make it so complex that the creature can't find a way through." I pulled out the 3 pendants Dr. Roth had given me. They were heavier than the original, and they hurt to hold, like they were burning cold. "That might work," Temperance said. "But you'll have to get close to the source, and the creature will try to stop you." "Then we'll distract it," Linda said, stepping forward with the other freed marked ones. "We still have enough connection to these things to get their attention." "That's suicide," I said. "Maybe, but better than letting that thing loose." Before I could argue, she and the others spread out, moving to gaps in the defensive circles. They pulled out the weapons Agent Sarah had provided and started firing at the darkness. The bullets didn't seem to hurt it, but they got its attention. The darkness shifted, focusing on these new irritants. "Now," Temperance said, "while it's distracted." I ran for the pit, Dr. Roth beside me. The source sensed us coming and reacted, sending out waves of psychic energy that made my head feel like it was splitting. But the original pendant was still there, still working, keeping it partially contained. "The placement matters," Dr. Roth shouted over the psychic noise. "Equidistant points around the original. It'll create a geometric seal much stronger than a single point." We circled the pit, looking for the right positions. The darkness noticed what we were doing and surged toward us, but the transformed humans moved to block it, sacrificing themselves to give us time. I watched Obadiah dissolve into nothingness, his last expression one of determination rather than fear. I placed the first pendant, speaking the words inscribed on its surface. It sank into the source like a nail into wood, sending out ripples of containment energy. The source screamed, a sound that wasn't audible but that I felt in my bones. Dr. Roth placed the second pendant on the opposite side. The 2 pendants connected, creating a line of force through the source. The darkness recoiled, as if burned. The 3rd pendant would complete the triangle, the strongest geometric form. But as I moved to place it, the darkness surged past the defensive lines. Coming straight for me, it touched my arm, and I felt myself starting to fade, to be erased from existence. Then Temperance was there, putting herself between me and the darkness. It consumed her instantly, but gave me the second I needed to place the final pendant. The effect was immediate. The 3 new pendants connected with the original, creating a complex geometric seal that pulsed with containment energy. The source contracted, compressed by the new boundaries, and the darkness, finding its meal suddenly inedible, recoiled. "Everyone out!" I shouted. "Now!" We ran for the tunnels, the freed marked ones and the remaining transformed humans all fleeing together. Behind us, the darkness raged, consuming everything it could reach. But it couldn't breach the reinforced seal, couldn't get to the source. The tunnels were collapsing again. reality reasserting itself, rejecting the impossible spaces. We climbed desperately, pulling each other up when someone faltered. I looked back once and saw Bill still at the bottom, holding the tunnel open with his impossible strength. "Go!" he shouted. "This is my purpose now, to make sure it stays buried." We emerged into the gas station to find it surrounded by Agent Sarah's forces. They pulled us to safety as the ground beneath the building began to sink. The entire gas station was being pulled down, swallowed by the earth as the underground spaces collapsed. Within minutes, there was nothing left but a depression in the desert, already being filled by blowing sand. No sign of the gas station, the tunnels, or the horrors beneath. The source was buried deeper than ever, protected by multiple seals, guarded by whatever transformed humans had survived. But also trapped with it was that darkness, that consuming thing that had been drawn to the contained energy. They were sealed together now, predator and prey, locked in a prison that neither could escape. "It's done," Agent Sarah said, reading her instruments. "The seal is holding, stronger than before." "For how long?" I asked. "Our models suggest centuries, maybe longer. Long enough for us to find a more permanent solution." I looked at the spot where the gas station had been. Somewhere far below, Bill and whatever remained of the transformed humans stood guard over horrors that should never see daylight. They were monsters, but they were our monsters, choosing to protect the world that had rejected them. Linda stood beside me, her arm showing new scars from where the darkness had touched her. We'd all been marked again, in a different way. Not bound to a place, but to a purpose. "There are other sites," she said quietly. "I know. They'll need to be reinforced, too. If that thing found one source, it might find others." I nodded. Our work wasn't done. It would never be done. There would always be another anomaly, another threat, another thing that shouldn't exist but did. But for now, the gas station was contained. The source was sealed. The darkness was trapped, and the world kept spinning, unaware of how close it had come to ending. Agent Sarah approached us with a briefcase. "The department would like to offer you official positions, resources, support, authority to operate at these sites." I looked at Linda, at Dr. Roth, at the other survivors. We were truck drivers and academics and ordinary people who'd seen too much. But we were also the only ones who really understood what was out there. "We work independently," I said. "We'll cooperate, share information, accept resources, but we're not your employees." She smiled. "I told them you'd say that. The offer stands if you change your mind." As we walked back to our vehicles, I took one last look at where the gas station had been. The sun was rising, painting the desert in shades of gold and red. Beautiful and peaceful, with no sign of the horror beneath. That's the thing about the world. It's layered. The surface that most people see and the depths that some of us know too well. And in between, thin places where one can break through to the other. My job, our job, is to make sure those breaks get sealed, to keep the layers separate, to make sure that when people stop at gas stations or rest stops or diners, they encounter nothing more unusual than stale coffee and overpriced snacks. It's not glamorous work. There's no recognition, no rewards beyond survival. But someone has to do it. Someone has to stand between the normal world and the things that would consume it. That someone is me. Ichabod Fairweather, truck driver turned guardian of reality's thin places. And as I drove away from that patch of desert, heading for the next anomaly on Dr. Roth's map, I knew I'd be doing this job until the day I died. Or until something worse than death found me. But that's a risk I accepted the night I first stopped at that abandoned gas station. The night I learned that some exits should never be taken, some doors should never be opened, and some things should stay buried forever. The gas station is gone now, collapsed into the earth with its secrets and its guardians. But I know it's still there, deep below, where Temperance's sacrifice and Bill's vigil continue, where the source pulses against its reinforced containment, where that consuming darkness waits for another chance to feed. And sometimes, when I'm driving through the desert at night, I think I can still hear them, the transformed ones who chose to be our shields against the dark. They're singing that wordless song, the one that used to call people in but now warns them away. It's beautiful in its way, and terrible, and absolutely necessary, because that's what stands between us and the things that would unmake the world. A song in the darkness, a seal that must not break, and the sacrifice of those who were once human but became something more, or something less. It depends on your perspective. But perspective doesn't matter when you're driving through the desert and you see an exit that shouldn't be there, leading to a place that shouldn't exist. What matters is that you keep driving, that you don't stop, that you remember this story and understand that curiosity can cost more than your life. It can cost your humanity. And in the abandoned places of America, humanity is a more precious commodity than you might think. It's what the things in the darkness hunger for, what they transform or consume, what they use to bridge the gap between their reality and ours. So drive carefully. Pay attention to your instincts. And if you ever find yourself at an abandoned gas station in the middle of nowhere, with lights that shouldn't be on and sounds that shouldn't exist, remember Ichabod Fairweather's story. Remember and keep driving. Because some stops are final in ways you can't imagine. And some transformations can't be undone, no matter how many pendants you carry or seals you place. The darkness is always there, pressing against the thin places, waiting for someone foolish enough to let it in. Don't be that someone. Your life, and perhaps your soul, depends on it.